Thank you for joining us today. It's been a while. So this was real impromptu. I literally texted the group today and was like, I miss you guys. I have nothing to talk about, but let's all get together. So go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Well, I'm Nurse Adrienne RN. You might see my puppy pop in because she's in the office with me and she's needing a little attention. I've got a podcast now here on YouTube, so make sure you guys subscribe, and great to see everybody.
Hey everybody, I'm Nurse Scott. I've got my own YouTube channel. I'm going through a master's program to become a family nurse practitioner, and my YouTube channel is kind of my journey through that. So it's good to see all you guys again. It's been a while. Missed you.
And I am Mr. Midwife. I'm somewhere in the southwest part of the United States. Sorry, I was having some technical difficulties getting in here, but here we are.
You look different, Mr. Midwife.
Yeah, I got rid of the cat, so I'm trying to do what Scott does.
Looks good, and your hair is like slicked back. I don't know, new hair, do everything. You look younger.
Oh, well, thanks for that. I'm actually older, so.
Well, we all are. Thank you so much for joining us, Saad. I hope that's how you pronounce your name. We're doing well. Thank you for asking. So I wanted to take today to just catch up everything, just what's been going on in everybody's life. Nurse Scott, I know that you're in school to become a nurse practitioner, family nurse practitioner, correct?
That is correct. And it's hard.
Tell us more about school, what classes you're in.
Yeah, it's I'm now in the last stretch. So the two big classes on how to be a family nurse practitioner, fall and spring, and then summer will just be practicum. And tucked away in there in May is graduation. So looking forward to that. Yeah, it's hard. I mean, it's putting all this stuff together now that we've gone through all these hard classes, but there's still studying to do, and there's still these exams, and that's the pain in the butt. But the upside is going to clinical, and I have an amazing preceptor that I finally found, and she and I like share a brain, and she's amazing, and we have a really good time, and I learn a lot. So that makes it worth it. So I was in clinical and having a good time, and now I have to do the study part. That's hard. So that's life. But it's going good. It's going good.
That's awesome.
You're almost at the finish line.
So close.
And Nurse Adrienne, you're going back to the hospital, back to bedside?
So I really miss my patients. I kind of came to a juncture in being a nurse and this my age and everything. And I thought, well, I'm either going to go back or I'm not. And I don't know. That's what I told myself anyways. So, we lost Chad. So I'm going back bedside. I just did, I spent about 6 weeks doing more interviews than I've ever done in my entire life. That was a full, interesting experience. So I'm really excited to get back into a hospital. And it was great doing a lot of interviews and throwing a broad net, because then I was able to really make the best choice for myself. And I'm excited about it.
And
what kind of nursing are you going to be doing?
Yes, that's my question.
Well, so I don't want to jinx myself, but I think it's going to be a pretty good position. It's a observation unit as part of an ED. So I'm actually going to be in the ED and just, hanging out with patients that otherwise would be taking up a bedroom, room inside the hospital. And also, I believe I'll be taking care of like people out of PACU, patients out of PACU that are waiting for a ride. But they still have to be under a nurse's care until they're actually discharged. And it's a magnet hospital, and the whole system, every hospital is magnet. And I'm super excited. Not going to say where I'm working, or, don't want to disclose all that where I'm at, but I am very, very much looking forward to it. And also excited to possibly cross train in the ED and maybe even recovery, which would be really awesome.
I think at our hospital, we called it the clinical decision unit, but it was just that as the observation unit. And it was a pretty sweet gig. I actually wanted to work there, but because I was in school and I shouldn't have said that in the interview. They're like, where do you see yourself in 3 to 5? was like, I'm in school. So anyways, I didn't get the position, but everybody that worked there really enjoyed it. Do you think you'll be dealing with a lot of like the cleaners will come in, I'm having chest pain, a lot of that was usually a lot of that there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I hope you like it, but it should be because a lot of them are walkie-talkie if they're in the observation unit.
Yeah, I have to say it was really funny. One of the interviews I had a lot of group interviews, and which is fine, but one of them I had it was kind of like probably two millennial managers, directors, and then two that were probably Gen X, maybe younger baby boomer. So one of the younger managers, asked me. They ask you these questions like, "Well, where do you see yourself in 3 years?" And you guys know how old I am, so I'm like, well, maybe on a beach somewhere for like a month. I don't know. You know what I mean? It's like I've already got an MBA. Maybe I'll go finish the master's or something. My friend's trying to talk me into doing a psych NP, but you know what I mean? I'm like, hey man, I'm just trying to like get back into bedside and patient care and get health insurance and work somewhere that I don't, that I feel appreciates me. And that's where I want to be.
And Mr. Midwife, how's everything been with you? Any news you want to share?
Everything's going relatively well with me. I am in the final stretch of my doctorate.
Wow.
The next 9 months, for the next 11 weeks, I'm in the planning phase. The 11 weeks after that, I'll be in the execution phase. And then the last 11 weeks, I will write it all up, and hopefully I'll use Nurse Scott Spring to help me do that because he's a better writer than I am. I can put three words together to form a sentence. That's it. But he's much better. So after that,
I can do
my doctorate. I'm looking forward. Say it again.
I can put like 5 or 6 words together. So I'll be happy to help.
You're twice as much as me then. Twice as much as me.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at. Yeah.
And what prompted you to get your doctorate? Do you have any plans afterward, or you just wanted to get it for your professional development?
I don't really have any plans per se afterwards. It's not that I want to sit on a board or make decisions with policy or anything else like that. It's just been a personal goal of mine for many, many years. And I thought if I'm going to do it, I better do it before I die because I'm not getting any younger. And
yeah, it's hard to get a doctorate after you die,
Well, they're posthumous, but that won't count so much.
It can be done.
Anyway, yep.
So I've already told my family. I've already told my family if something happens to me between now and May, you make sure that university grants that degree posthumously. I want that.
That's right. That's right.
Well, you guys are inspiring me. Who knows?
It can
Who knows?
be done.
Well, Adrian, you, me, and Scott are all the same age. Bridget's a young buck, but if Scott and I can do it, dadgummit, you can do it. So
it takes time. It takes time out of your schedule. You definitely, can't live the free and easy lifestyle you did before, if indeed you did. There's chunks of time that I don't know how people with families and jobs and partners and all that do it, because you need a big chunk of time to just read through these chapters and highlight and listen to the video lectures and take notes, and then finally look over your notes again and again. And then, oh, by the way, there's a written assignment for clinical due on Monday that you have to go through, and you have to look things up, so it's challenging and it's time consuming, but it's doable.
Yeah.
Especially if you're well motivated to do it, if you're doing it like, I guess I'll get a master's, but then you're going to burn out. But if you
and I think for me, I definitely would want to go to, a reputable school, not a degree mill. The degree mill options are a big topic, right? And so, yeah. And just, I think it'll be good, being back in a hospital to kind of just get to know providers, get to know the lay of the land a little bit, because that's been very hard the last couple of years, just being on the outside of it, being a newcomer to my area. So that'll be, some fun stuff. So, but yeah. And that is now, Ms. Midwife, is that a requirement? Because I know is there still talk about like the 2025 or 2024 requirement?
That's not why I'm doing it. I mean, they've been talking about this for decades now, right?
Right.
And it may or may not come to pass. I just always wanted that terminal degree. Not to mention the fact that I'll be 50 something years old. I'm not going to say the exact number because I am. I'll be 50 something when I do finish, and I'm trying to set the example for my kids that, you know, if I can do this when I'm 50 some odd years old, you can dang certain do it when you're 28. Just
Right.
trying to draw the line in the sand and say, you know, here's the goal.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they've been. It's
But anyway,
parallel. We've talked about this before. It's parallel to when they were talking about the bachelor's being the minimum to be an RN, and they simply cannot crank out enough BSNs to meet the demand. It just
Right.
no.
So the same with the mid-levels or these advanced practice providers. There's no way they can crank out enough doctors. You know, people with
Right.
doctorate.
There's got to be one. There's got to be capacity in the schools to do
Yeah.
that, which is not.
Yeah.
So that's a barrier right there. You can set all the deadlines you want, but you can't. You know, you got to have schools that have capacity, which is an issue, and then geographic flexibility as well.
Yeah, something, and I bring this up not to downplay what Mr. Midwife is doing, but his is not. It's probably the one I'll go for when I'm done with mine. It's not a practical doctorate. In other words, it's not a doctorate in nurse practitioner or in nurse midwifery. It's a general nursing doctorate.
Correct.
And there are very few of
Correct.
those, and I like that because you don't have
Yep.
to do more clinical.
Right. Gotcha.
So, you know, there are doctorals with different focus, with different foci. But this one, I guess you kind of do your own, and there's no clinical. So it's a little bit different than going for a practical doctorate. It's still called a DP, a DNP, Doctor of Nursing Practice.
Is it
Right.
because though he's already done his like his clinicals and all that for the midwife part?
No, if you go for a DNP in like if I do my MSN in family nurse practitioner and then do a DNP in family nursing practice, I have to do like another 400 hours of clinical for that. So, you know, but if you go for a doctorate that doesn't require that, it's a focus in nursing management or nursing education, or like the one that we're talking about is just a general nursing doctorate.
Right.
I don't know,
Let's
maybe it
do a
depends on
project.
the region, but from everything I've read, because I'm FNP, if I do my DNP, I have to do the research portion, like this, all those rest of those classes, but it is not a requirement for me to do additional clinical hours because I already did the clinical hours.
Oh, well, maybe.
So like you can go from like, you don't even have to be a nurse practitioner for this, right? So you can just go from BSN, boom, go to a doctoral program that you come out and you're able then to teach theory. So it's more in the theoretical.
Well, there's PhDs
option.
which don't require any kind of clinicals, and a lot of those that are in education, they get PhDs. But from my understanding, if you get a DNP, that's nursing practice attached at the end, you have to do clinical hours. There's no way of getting around that.
No, you don't. There's actually, so you can do a PhD route or you can do a doctoral route. So it used to be in the old days, right? If you were going to do a terminal degree, unless it was like an MBA, which there are doctoral in business, which to me is dumb. But anyways, that's another topic. It was all PhD. You had to write a thesis, defend your thesis, basically get published, really very strict as to what universities granted those. With the kind of advent of online schools, kind of alternative kind of education.
I think it depends maybe on the state. Like I'm literally looking things up here and it's like the DNP degree is a clinical doctorate that requires 1,000 baccalaureate precepted clinical hours.
So there's usually 650 or somewhere around there at the master's level. So you'd have to do another 350.
Yeah. So
you guys are saying that to my knowledge, there's not a DNP that doesn't require clinical hours, but you guys are saying that there's a DNP that does not.
Right. There's three. So there's kind of three tracks. So there's like, I want to just go get a PhD from UCLA in nursing practice or something, right? I'm going to go write a thesis. I'm going to get published. I'm going to be in like a mainstream university. The other one is I'm going to go get a DNP, which could have some bridge from a nurse practitioner. So that's a nurse practitioner kind of role. So some people are a doctorate of nurse practitioner, like I'm going to think not nurse practitioner, doctorate trained. Then there's a doctoral program in nursing practice, which really should be called nursing theory, closely aligned with the PhD, I would say, but
okay.
on the applied part of theory.
So like if you do, I'm just looking, there's DNP in like nursing informatics, health policy.
Right.
On the one hand, I was thinking it might make more sense if you're going at the doctorate level, either as your first step as being a nurse practitioner, nurse midwife, or clinical nurse specialist, or after a master's, whatever, that's a DNP, a doctor of nursing practice. If you, however, you get into a doctoral, non-PhD doctoral program for nursing, maybe it should be called a Doctor of Nursing Science, and there are such degrees. Or a DN, a Doctor of Nursing. They've gone by the wayside, and they're all like DNPs now, but just
It's
that
confusing.
word practice, don't let that hang you up. It's because anything we do is practice, right? Informatics is nursing practice in a way.
I mean, there
So
certainly
guess
is like a
technically
capstone. So often they'll be like, maybe whereas a PhD, you have to do a hardcore thesis, scientific research, something on that level. But on a doctoral, then you can also do a, whoop, we lost Bridget. Wait, she's back.
Well,
She's
my
back.
husband
She's
just came
gone.
home, so I was
She's
like,
back.
"Hey, close the door."
It's usually like a capstone kind of project. You're still writing a big paper. It's just it's a little bit different.
Okay,
You know?
so I guess what I was confused on was if you're going to be like in a clinical setting, though, clinicals are required. But if you're doing some other kind of informatics leadership, then clinicals are not required.
Think of it this way.
Right.
If you were going to
In
bill
general, yeah.
for your services and you're going to touch people, right? Yeah, that's clinical. So
Yeah.
that's a distinction. If you have a doctorate like what Scott's talking about, Mr. Midwife's doing, although they already will have their nurse practitioner license,
Yeah.
you're not touching patients. You're just going off to teach, do theory, or use that somehow, consulting, whatever, health policy, whatever you want to do.
Okay.
I'm actually one of the nurses I know in the local nurse practitioners organization is getting her DNP, and we were talking about her project and everything. And I said something about research, and she goes, "Oh, no, wait, no, it's not research. It's quality improvement program." And I'm like, there's a fine line. Yeah. There really is such a fine line because it's structured the same way. The outcome, I mean, the goal is different. One is just to find knowledge. The other one is to really make a change in a clinical area. But there's a lot of similarities. So the PhD is research. You do research for research's sake. It's in the area of whatever you major in, right? Nursing. And you do write a dissertation and you defend it and all that kind of good stuff. The DNP falls into the category of, now that's the highest academic degree, the Doctor of Philosophy. There are professional degrees. An MD is a professional degree. It's not a PhD. Some doctors have both, but that's another story. Or DO. If you've ever heard of a PsyD, a PSYD, PsyD, those are psychologists who are trained to be clinical psychologists at the doctorate level, but they weren't PhDs. They didn't do research. They probably had a big project as well. So it's focused on practice, whether it's an MD, a DDS, a PsyD, or a DNP. These fall in the category of professional doctorates, not academic doctors, which would be the PhD.
Scott, your dogs are being inappropriate in the background.
Hey, he rarely does that. Thank you.
Yeah, well, get it on camera this time.
Right here.
Oh my God.
So for my school, the type of doctoral project that we do is, like Scott was saying, quite a
He never does that. He's been fixed. What are you up to? What was that all about? No, don't lick me after that.
And everybody's
He's doing a mating habits of dachshunds. That's his top.
So everybody will do some kind of a they'll do a project along the lines of, okay, so there's this particular STD is really rampant in this particular population. How can we best educate them? Are they going to respond better to written material, person-to-person teaching, video, that kind of quality improvement? Or like the admit through discharge process of this hospital seems to be really choppy. Is it a communication problem? Is it a flow problem? Is there some kind of process that we can improve? And that's where we discover the problem, think about how we can fix it, try to implement a fix, and then at the end we write it up. And it's more about going through the process, so that hopefully we could sit on a board and make policy changes and things like that. So it's kind of what they're aiming for.
Yeah.
So I was going to go.
Which is kind of like research. What works better for that to get to this outcome, and then you could, right? I mean, it's research, but it's in my mind, it's research, but it's focused on making actual change. You still have to use statistics, I guess that's the thing.
Yes.
Still got to do those
Ugh.
statistics. I actually, yeah, I like statistics, but I like the stuff a lot of people don't like.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
I'll let you
I
crunch my
like the
numbers then.
idea.
How's that?
But look, I mean, when I did my psychology degree, I had to do 2 statistics classes. Like Scott, like because you also had a degree right before, and
Yeah.
back in the old days before computers, like when you literally had to cut and
Yeah,
type and retype, and maybe then we had word processors. There was no apps. There was like no anything to crunch numbers. I mean,
oh, you
now
were
it's
taking it
stats
before
is
I
so
did
easy.
because by the time I took it, we had SPSS. That was the big thing. SPSS.
That's what
Yeah,
I
I
used.
started college in high school, so which was a
Oh,
huge
I was like,
disadvantage in like 1984. So yeah.
yeah.
so, it's
So
so much easier now, everybody. Don't be afraid of any of these things. I mean, you got YouTube, you got tutorials, there's nothing you can't learn. There's so many different study guides. I mean, even when I went to nursing school, we didn't have a lot of online tools. There was I remember one like Manuel's Web or something that we used that had a bunch of tips, but yeah, don't be afraid of any of this stuff. Lean into whatever you think is challenging.
Yeah. Scott, do you remember what Mark Twain said about statistics?
Yes, I do. It's one of my favorite quotes. He asked me that because he knows I know. It's,
That's right.
there are 3 kinds of lies in the world. There are lies, there are damned lies, and statistics. So meaning,
So-
some things are just not true. Some things are untrue and they offend me. Those damn lies. And the statistics is you can make those numbers say, crunch them the wrong way. So you have to be very careful. I see it all the time on TV commercials when they talk about this, that, or the other. And I even had a discussion with my study buddy who is smarter than me. We were talking about, there's a question that said, how long does it take for most of this drug to be eliminated from the body? And I said, oh, it's going to take so many half-lives. So that's going to, wait, most just means 50% plus 1. That's not all of it. That would be 4 half-lives. So anyway, she's like, no, most means like almost all of it. I'm like, no, most is a majority. Most means 50. Anyway, so those words can be thrown around. Yeah.
Bridget, I want to say before we go any further, thank you. You have great videos, you guys. If you haven't watched Bridget's tutorial, she actually, drops some really good knowledge. And unlike the rest of us are just, blather on about whatever we're doing now. Scott, you got good stuff for NP students. But yeah, I actually used your video for my ACLS because I was like freaking out because I was like, oh my God. And then I didn't have my study guides. I was like, so thank you. I watched a couple of your videos. I know you had an older one, and then I think an updated one. And then I went to go do ACLS, and then there weren't enough people. I guess nobody else showed, so that I couldn't do the mega code because it requires like 4 people. So I had to come back and do the whole thing again with this.
Did you get it though?
It was. Yeah, it just turns out there's a lot of scammy schools out there. I was, putting out the word on Facebook, hey, do you know a school? And I'm getting DM'd like, send me this. And I was like, and I don't know because of COVID, like, oh, are they allowing this online? I knew I had to do AHA, but it's really hard to check because even the legit ones are kind of hokey. You know what I mean? They kind of have their websites look like they're from the 1980s, even though we didn't have websites back then. But they're not always. They're kind of mom and pop shops, right? So yeah, so I had to do it twice. That's where I got the video on TikTok that kind of went viral about the nursing, the traveler I met who came from MedSurg, who I realized immediately when we were doing the mega code, he had never even been in a code, let alone knew nothing about telemetry. And he was going into ICU with 2 days training as a travel nurse.
Wow.
And so I re-upped my ACLS on Monday. I'm looking forward to this again. And for AHA, you do all of your written and theoretical testing online. You print out a certificate from that, says you completed it and passed it.
Yeah.
And then you take this to where I'm going to do the mega code, and then they sign you off.
I thought it was hard. Yeah. The online part.
It's not easy. It's not easy.
I mean, being away for 3 years, because rhythms are a language, and I was just like, 2nd degree wanky bug. Blah. I'm like, why can I not remember that one?
Your eyes glaze over, and
yeah. So thank you, Bridget. Bridget's got great stuff. And hey, at Columbia, we got a Colombian nurse.
Yeah, Heidi from Colombia. I'm Colombian. And
ACLS is one of those certifications I kind of let drop away when I stopped working.
It's expensive.
Yeah, and so I had to do
I
BLS for
have
school. So I
to
did that.
redo it.
And then this last week, I was like, CEN has been part of my name for my entire career, the Certified Emergency Nurse Credential. It shows up on mail sometimes. It's like, that's not part of my name. And I kind of missed it. So I took the exam Saturday and recertified. So I'm a CEN again, which
Awesome.
I feel complete. I know it may not seem like much, but I have those 3 extra letters now, along with all the rest, and I just feel more complete. Like because this is what I'm supposed to know in the world, right? Every time we talk, it's like, emergency stuff. Scott, what do you think? It's like, oh, geez. This kind of is a validation that, yes, I do know what I'm talking about. I don't know everything. I'm not the expert, but I do, I'm not just making it up.
I think the hospital I'm going to work at, I don't think they require it. I think they give a bonus or something. For me, I'm just like, oh, it's all these things you got to pay for every year. You know what I mean? It adds up. It adds up. So yeah, welcome Heidi. All right. So she's from Bogota. Where is she? Bogota?
Yeah.
And you're from Medellin?
Medellin. Mm-hmm.
All right. That's so awesome. Is she in Colombia or is she?
Yeah, she said, or maybe no, she says, hi, hello, I'm from Colombia. So maybe she lives here in the States.
She has family.
Yeah.
And Medellin. Oh, that's so cool. Awesome. That's
I
that's
love
my
going
next
to
thing
Japan.
is really working on my Spanish, especially being back in a hospital situation. So wish me luck, everybody, because we all know I'm no sabe.
Yeah.
She said, yes, I am, but I don't know if yes, I am. Heidi, are you in Colombia or in the United States? It's Hispanic Heritage Month in the States right now until October 15th. Yeah, it is. Amazon has a great movie called A Million Miles Away about this migrant farm worker who is Mexican, and his dream was to be an astronaut. And despite all odds, he made it. It's a very inspiring movie. Well, spoiler alert, I should have said that before.
No, but that's cool.
His dreams come true.
Right? No, absolutely. I've actually been watching some YouTubes about expats in Mexico, and there's actually a window right now where it's pretty easy to get your residency in Mexico without actually going to Mexico. All right, she married a gringo. Okay,
she married a gringo. Yeah. I was in Colombia with my aunt, and we got in an elevator, and she was like, "Ay, ese gringo." I was like, "Tia, they know what that means now. Like, you can't just say it."
Oh my God!
So what month is it? What is the month
for Hispanic Heritage? It starts September. I believe it starts September 15th and it runs until October 15th.
That sounds right.
It's a mid-month thing. Yeah. I know. It's somebody sent me a message. They're like, happy
yesterday.
Happy Hispanic Heritage.
I guess you could call yesterday Penicillin Day because it was 95 years ago yesterday that Alexander Fleming discovered penicillin. And we saw a patient yesterday in clinic who had strep throat, and we prescribed penicillin. And I'm like, oh my God, you're getting penicillin on Penicillin Day. He's like
what?
That's weird.
Don't these drugs magically appear, right?
My preceptor and I looked at each other. She goes, I heard that on the radio. Yeah, me too. Oh, NPR. Yeah, okay. And the patient's just like, do I get a prescription or what do I do?
I mean,
we tend to get really excited about like nerdy things, and then they just don't get it.
I thought about it. Do you realize it's been less than 100 years we've had antibiotics? It hadn't occurred to me, but yeah.
I was thinking the other day, how far have we come in the advent of healthcare over the last 100 years? Nurses used to be bedpans and wiping your brow. And that's all they did. That's all Florence Nightingale did was fluff their pillows. Now we're so advanced, we got nurse practitioners who are doing part of the doctor's job.
Part of the
Semmelweis with his hand washing.
I want to get away
anesthesia.
I want to get away from referring to physicians as doctors only, because I'm working on like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
you want to open that can of worms?
And I will argue. I'm sorry, what was that?
you want to open that can of worms? Use of
No,
the-
I don't want to open that can of worms, but I do want to make the distinction that MDs are not the only doctors. That's all I want to like. People seem to not be able to separate the doctorate is a terminal degree in any profession from. So that being said,
It's really hard.
and
Healthcare.
I would say, I don't know how they would feel about us saying that we're doing the doctor's job, you know?
Well, those
Well,
that are
I mean,
invited will know that we
what I
are
said
doing
was
part of their job.
we're
Not all
doing
of it.
part of their job. We're doing procedures. You know, I'm doing pap smears and breast exams. I'm prescribing medications and so on and so forth. Where are we going to be in another 50 years or 100 years from now?
Well, we'll be dead.
Well, we will. I'll be pushing up daisies. But
We'll be.
where's healthcare going to be? What will have we discovered? What advancements have been made? Where are we going to be? It'd be interesting to sit back and see.
I am really appreciative of, and there's going to be advancements regardless of, you know, in technology, in medication, hopefully, right? But I'm also really proud of the advancements that other nurse practitioners have made, other nurses have made, because it's been hard, especially in a predominantly female-dominated profession. We've had to overcome a lot of sexism, a lot of ignorance. Like you were saying, Mr. Midwife, that most people, even though as nurses we do a lot more now than fluff pillows, the idea is still that, right? A lot of times, even for Halloween, nurses are objectified. Like they just see us as like, oh, fluff my pillows. This, like, we have so much more. There is so much more that we do. There is so much critical thinking, even at the bedside level, right? Forget advanced practice, but even at the bedside level, we can be the difference between a patient declining and unaliving versus catching something and bringing it up to the physician. And then as a nurse practitioner, again, I'm just very grateful. My body couldn't have taken bedside forever. And I have kind of evolved in this profession. When I first started, I didn't want to be a nurse practitioner, but the more knowledge you gain, the more you want to increase your scope of practice. And you feel like, you know what, I can do more. So I'm just so grateful that the position of nurse practitioner is available. And I treat it with a great deal of respect. And I think it's a great honor that we get to diagnose and prescribe medication, but there's still so much. I have a job now and that I enjoy. So there's a few videos that how Nurse Scott said, like, that are opening a can of worms. I actually made them private or deleted them because I don't want anything coming back to me about them. But there's still so much that, and a lot of physicians are okay with nurse practitioners, right? But many also just cannot. They just cannot palate us.
Well, and it's not for the bulk of my experience. It's not that they don't trust us; it's that we're encroaching on their territory. And
that's not what they say,
right?
Which is odd because it's a territory that they can't hold the line on because they can't. We're not. People are not going. I mean, there's a whole discussion, right, about general practitioners, internal medicine. MDs, DOs going into specialties, just not enough providers coming in to the pipeline. But as well, does that mean it's going to, lead down a downward spiral to the pay and the status, right, of who those, who people are as advanced nurse practitioners, with the exception of probably nurse anesthetists, right, because they actually preceded doctors doing anesthesia, MDs doing anesthesia. They're the one profession that preceded any MD doing anesthesia, and they can bill as students, which I don't think anybody else can. Right. So here, check this out. Just here's an aside for CRNA. One anesthesiologist can supervise 2 student nurse anesthetists, right? They can bill for themselves and they can bill for both those students. So it's interesting to look.
I'm not able to open the links that you're putting in the chat because it makes it pop up on the live stream. So like when I click it, and it's not showing. So I'm not sure what you're saying.
Bridget, use a right click and do open a new tab. Maybe that'll
it's not giving me that option.
No? Okay.
Okay.
Let's try.
It's
Anyway.
a super long. Yeah, that's a super, maybe there's, because I'm pulling it up and it's weird because it's got the dot, dot, dot. I don't know why. But I wanted to just bring that up. So there's a couple really famous healers and nurses that both came out of Jamaica.
Can you
There's
put it
Nanny
in the private chat so I can try to open it and bring it up?
Oh, yeah. Let me see if I can do that. Yeah. Nanny of the Maroons and Mary Seacole. So, and we just don't learn about them. We don't, I put that one in.
And I just got like a really ugly comment the other day. I am not saying that a DNP is equivalent to an MD. I'm not saying that. I'm saying it's a doctorate, but I'm not trying to compare. And then the whole thing with like scope creep, I think they call it, is what the AMA calls it. I understand, like, there's definitely, I'm okay with the term mid-level provider, but there is a shortage of physicians, and it's frankly is not that difficult to treat a UTI, right? If we're all following the same guidelines.
Right.
And that's the thing that a lot of people don't realize is, like, in medicine, there's guidelines, there's a guidebook. So we're all following the same playbook, so the outcome is going to be the same if we are following those guidelines. So
that said, there is some judgment involved. I mean, it's like when you look things up, because I'm doing a lot of that now, and it'll say you can give, like just for an example, penicillin for 5 to 10 days or 500 milligrams 2 or 3 times a day. But like, well, which is it? 2 or 3 times a day? Why? We just pick one? But it's up to the provider to decide what's appropriate for that patient, or which antihypertensive do we want to put you on. It's like, well, you could go to anyone, but I found that this one works best, or
and I think
do well in that
nurses
one.
are in a great position.
It's not just looking it up in the book, but there are definitely guidelines.
Yeah, there's guidelines, but even usually we will have guidelines. Okay, this is the first line recommended antihypertensive. For example, with diabetes, we usually start with metformin. If you're following like forget the endocrinologist, but we're following individuals that are endocrinologists or cardiologists and the guidelines that they populate. So MDs are following those guidelines, and so are we, ideally. But like you said, yes, there is clinical decision making, and that's why it's so important to not go to a diploma mill. I will be the first to say that should all nurses be nurse practitioners? Not necessarily. And are all nurse practitioners fantastic? No, of course. There's going to, just like every profession, there's going to be bad apples in it. But don't judge the bad apples. Don't put that judgment on all of us, because like, I'm very proud to be a nurse practitioner, and I'm just trying to do the best for my patients at the end of the day.
And
Yeah,
my initial comment,
Go ahead.
my initial comment was, you go back 100 years or 125 years, and we're really in the Stone Ages. But with the advent of penicillin and proper anesthesia and Semmelweis with his hand washing and all these little changes that we've made and progress that we've made, we've come a really, really long way. Nursing as a profession has gone from fluffing pillows and wiping your brow to nurse practitioners. We've moved so far. Where are we going to be in another 50 years? Where are we going to be another 100 years? It's just, things are just moving.
I have a prediction, because I think the public is becoming used to nurse practitioners and nurse midwives, and they're getting used to the language. There's a big discussion right now with the California law that's giving nurse practitioners independent practice, stepwise, but eventually independent practice. It includes like what Spanish term to use. That's actually the nurse who's getting the DNP. She's working on that as her project, clarifying the language, because what's in the law is completely wrong. And we need to use the language that the Spanish-speaking people in California already use. And so there's that. But there's also in English, nurse practitioner. But I think people are already saying, I'm going to the doctor on Friday. And what they mean is they're going to see their nurse practitioner, and they know that. It's not like they're surprised when they get there. So I think in the future, it may be, if the physicians don't push back too much, doctor will be kind of the job, which can be filled by either a physician or a nurse practitioner or a physician assistant. So it won't be, we won't have that problem, and we'll be able to say, hi, I'm Dr. Jones, I'm a nurse practitioner, and I'll be seeing you today, and nobody will blink an eye.
I think eventually we will get there to the general public. always ask. I always say I'm a nurse practitioner. I don't even say NP because I don't want. I want to spell it out for you. I am a nurse practitioner, right? I do agree with you, Scott. I think maybe 50 years from now, it will become more norm. But at this time, it's like what they say is that if you say, "Hi, I'm Dr. So and so," they're automatically going to assume you are a physician, so you are misleading them. And that's the whole argument about why you shouldn't call yourself a doctor, blah blah blah. And that's usually like the majority of negative comments, or like, get over yourselves, even from nurses, so anyways,
Yet those same arguments don't apply if it's your physical therapist, right? And they all have to have a doctoral degree, and that they'll come in and say, "Hi, I'm Dr. So and so," right? But there's a lot of other fields. It could be also lab scientists. It could be pathologists,
psychologist. My sister is not even a clinical psychologist. Her degree, she's an industrial psychologist. She's Dr. So and so. So
well, I mean, it's like Dr. Jill Biden, right? She has a doctorate
in education.
Is it education? Yeah. So it's some academic subject. I mean, certain masters are harder than others. I'm thinking of my own, and certain doctorates I'm sure are harder than others. You can't you can't say she put in the academic diligence in her educational doctorate as someone who did a PhD in microchemical molecular genetics, something. But they all did get to the level in their field, and
Exactly.
they awarded the title doctor. And I tell you what, when I get mine, if I get mine, my mom is going to call me doctor. Okay, I mean, that title is something you earn. I'm going to be wearing my robes to the grocery store.
You're
Little
hilarious.
overdressed, aren't you, there, Scott?
And I'm over here like I've never once attended any of my graduations. I'm just like,
I think exactly. I think at the end of the day, like I said, we're not saying that let's stop comparing each other. Like, just nurse practitioners are in their lane, MDs are in their lane. And
the lanes are crossing, and that's where, and I give them credit. They're worried about people being confused, and none of us disagree with that. Nobody wants to mislead.
They're worried about status. They're worried about status. Because look at the states. The California Medical Association is an incredibly powerful lobby for them, for the CMA, California Medical Association, to be able to bring a suit against a nurse practitioner, have that hold up in court, right? Which they have no jurisdiction over, right? Because that's under the Board of Registered Nursing of California. And now there's a counter lawsuit against that, which is really, I think, going to gain traction. I think these are about, there's this issue of status, yet it's not about the practical, filling the actual practical need of the people, of the humans in our country, because nurse practitioners don't. So for folks who don't know this, most countries don't recognize nurse practitioners. I don't know where that trend's going to go, but that's also one of the issues, is that, you don't, I'm from California. Scott's from California.
I'm not, but I used to, in my early 20s, I was in love with a guy from California. I thought I was going to move there.
I was born in California. Does that count?
See, there you go. I might end up back there. I mean, if I get some PACU training, I mean, Kaiser's paying almost $200,000 for PACU nurses in Northern California.
I almost said something I would regret, like, how hard is PACU? But every specialty has its own challenges, and I'm sure that one does. So I don't want to.
Having had a bad recovery out of a surgery, I think.
I mean, as much, going back to, I think a lot of people I was talking to a friend of mine who's an engineer, and he didn't mean to, but he was like very dismissive. He's like, oh, well, what I'm doing is really we were discussing salaries, and I don't want to say my salary, but he was a little bit butthurt. I will say, I thank God I got a really good job, right? Our salaries are very equivalent. We both have master's degree, but he was butthurt. It felt like he was butthurt that I was making what he was making. And he was like, well, I'm doing some really complicated things here. And I'm like, wait. Like, I have a master's degree. I've gone to school. I put it, like all my 20s were in school. Like, being an NP requires additional education than being an R. And I don't think a lot of people realize that. I think a lot of people think, and I think a lot of people still think NPs are just RNs that decided to prescribe medication someday.
Right. People don't understand what we know as nurses. I encounter that all the time with friends of mine, or people where, recent experience I had of a friend of mine, hopefully she's not watching this live, but, like she was in another country, came up with hypertension. She's a little younger than me. And the drug that she was given in her country where she's living is not even being used here anymore. And I said, oh, it's a combo. It was a combo drug also. So I didn't know what it was. I had to look it up because it's a different name over there. And I said, that is kind of odd that they're starting you at this drug and this dose, just FYI. But, it's like, and then it's having all kinds of what I could perceive as side effects of it, but whatever. But, and I think that a lot of times people do not realize how much critical thinking knowledge we have and how much experience we have, especially those of us who have worked in hospitals, worked in really complex settings. I've been 3 years out of the hospital. I can still look at somebody, because I love pathophys. I love I love the meds. I love the math. I love all that stuff. I love the puzzle of healthcare. When you know it, you just know it. You can look at somebody, you can hear what they're taking, and you're like, oh, yep, here's where your next 5 years are going to go, right? I wanted to ask you guys, so just an aside on this. So Mr. Bidwai was talking about medicine, right? And modern medicine. And so, evidence, I didn't know that evidence-based medicine are like journals, right? That journals are relatively new, like just since the 50s and 60s. So publishing actual research, evidence-based medicine, and then this is shocking to me. Guess when the term evidence-based medicine actually started?
1992.
1991. Like my mind is blown, right? Like this is very recent. So we talk about advances in medicine, right? And then now we're evidence-based nursing. This is all, this is 30 years. That is.
Well, they've given it a name in 1991. I think the smart people were keeping up on the research and practicing in nursing and medicine all along, but it's one of those buzzwords. It's like patient-centered care or primary nursing.
But there wasn't a lot of clinical trials. There wasn't a lot of studies done, that were there, and also a lot of, mostly white men for medications, right? We know a lot of medications we currently use and prescribe and algorithms have never been researched on women.
That's a good point. Women and minorities.
Minorities, right? Absolutely. And, I went to school in 2005 to 2007, and our textbooks said Black people have a higher, more hypertension, as if it was something essential, right? Which it's not. That's racism, right? But it gets these things just like, there's a lot of mythology. So when we talk about, just think about this. Think about hormone replacement therapy. Here's a myth, right? Hormone replacement therapy is going to give you cancer, right? That was a complete myth that then wove its way into medical textbooks and has now been debunked. BMI debunked, right? Because we know, look at Japanese people. They're the unhealthy skinny, right? They don't fit the BMI model. So again, there's a lot of ethnic groups that don't fit that BMI model. So there's a lot of things that have woven their way into what we consider the knowledge base that are completely false based on, some doctor, somebody got in front of a camera and on a news story, and then it just took off from there. Right?
But not all of it.
There are
not all of it.
No. I'm just saying, but there's some big stuff.
I hate to be that guy. I hate to be that guy that says there are studies that show, but there are studies that show hypertension is at higher rates in African Americans than it is in whites.
There is a genetic predisposition towards certain conditions, like the how do I pronounce it? The the Jewish, Ashkenazi Jewish. If you are a certain race, you are more likely to get hypertension or diabetes, right?
Well, there's some DNA linkages, but when you take those people and you go to Ghana and you do research on hypertension in Ghana, guess what? They don't have hypertension. Guess what? They got hypertension coming here.
Guess what? People in Ghana are not African American. They're African.
Well, nobody's really African American. What do you call a Black person in Canada?
Well, yeah, I know.
I have a minor in Black studies, and
I'm just saying, though,
my professor made a good point about that. Like, there's no point in which somebody.
And And I think I think you and I, and it's just for, it's okay that we can agree to disagree, but so with the hormone replacement, like even the cancer research does hormone replacement therapy. And I'm saying it would be different, the route, right? Vaginal versus oral, also
Absolutely.
very, very different. But they say that slight increased risk of breast cancer, ovarian. Will they all get it? No. And I do know personally, my mom has 15 siblings. I don't know how many off the top of my head are women, but out of the one that took oral hormone replacement therapy, she's the one that ended up with breast cancer. So it does slightly raise your risk, So, but I mean, I do agree that there are some things out there that haven't been researched enough or that are perhaps erroneous.
Well, they
My
just get
point
taken
is
too far as
that
like
you
a
have to,
gospel.
my point is that you have to apply the information in an educated way. If the study was done on African Americans, in other words, Black people in America, in the United States or North America, you can apply it probably to Canadian Black people, but not to people in Ghana. You see what I'm saying? There may be something about that population very different than the diet, the stress levels, the environment, the pollution, whatever it might be. You can only abstract information from a study where it makes sense. So.
And they are doing research into epigenetics, and certain medications work better in a certain population, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, but
they're more. Go ahead.
The question is, why does this medication work better in this population than the other? There's a genetic component. They uptake it better, they excrete it better, it processes somewhere in the process, it hits the Krebs cycle differently. There's a genetic component that you cannot argue with that. There's a genetic component. I'm sorry.
But I think it goes back to who do we do the clinical trials on?
Mm-hmm.
So then it's like, so that why is that the medication?
Certainly, once upon a time, it was strictly white men. But nowadays, I mean, I was in drug research for a couple of years, not so long ago, and we had all populations. We had tall, skinny, blonde, purple, green, pink,
and I'm
gay,
studying
straight, bi. I mean, you name it, we had it.
Right.
And I'm studying this stuff right now, and the textbooks are very up to date. And they'll even say it is no longer recommended that Black people get a different first-line hypertensive drug than Caucasians.
Right.
That, it'll tell it says that sometimes, and sometimes it says you should know the incidence of this disease is higher in, first of all, Asians, and second of all, Hispanics, third of whatever. We joke, my study buddy and I always joke it's always the Blacks. It's always higher in Blacks.
And it depends too. Like that's what Nurse Adrienne was talking about, like cultural things. For example, it's stomach cancer. I believe it's Japan, right? Because they eat a lot of smoked meat or smoked fish. So, is it some is genetic, some is cultural influences, but it is important to know these cultural differences because you know what to look for.
Mm-hmm.
And but this is patients as individuals. That goes in life. Whatever ideas you have about a group of people, gay people or Black people or young people or old people, whatever ideas you have, maybe there's some truth to any of those stereotypes, which the key is, this has been my life philosophy.
Yes.
Always treat people as individuals.
Yes.
And let them show you who they are. They may show you that they fit that stereotype exactly, and they may show you they're nothing like that stereotype. But the important thing, have that back in your, and for medical reasons too, have it in your head. Hey, this person's African American. They could very well have high blood pressure or diabetes, or I should maybe ask them if they have a history of sickle cell anemia in their family. But you don't assume they have any of those things until you take a look and you treat that one patient. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I think also too, there's a history of, there's also, we have to look at like the history of medicine. There's a lot of very famous physicians who also were proponents of eugenics, John Bell being one of the more famous ones. So, I mean, there's a lot, and I would say like, now that I'm kind of on this side of the country, on the East Coast, I meet a lot more island people, right? A lot more Black people that are not American born, American raised. So they were raised, everybody, they were raised around Black professionals, right? People that look like them in every place in society. And their experience of themselves is so markedly different from, American Black people, I would say. The same thing when I went to Europe, in Europe, it's very different. But I just think that, oppression does impact, right? We know stress response, right? We know what the stress response is. That impacts us, right?
Yeah.
So it's, but I think like things like the, barring gay men who sleep with men from donating blood, But yet, if you're heterosexual and you know, are in high risk activity, go ahead, donate blood. You know what I mean? That ban is thankfully over now. But you know, it's just voodoo medicine, right? So I'm sorry to
Right,
interrupt you,
but
first midwife.
you know, science and research, one and the same. It's not stagnant. We're constantly
Right.
learning and growing. And what we absolutely knew yesterday to be the truth, we find out today is not, and we were wrong. And so part of science is getting it right, but the other part is getting it wrong, learning from our mistakes. And so it's hard for I try not to throw rocks at people because they were doing the best they can with what they had. We just learn from our mistakes, we move on, we try not to make that mistake again, and we just keep hopefully moving forward, not moving backwards.
One way it's
Absolutely.
very problematic that one day we can have one thing and the next day we can have another is when you're in school taking an exam. The last exam.
Yes.
And this is, I mostly have good things to say about my school, but there's a few things that stick in my craw. And one of them was they asked when a longtime smoker, a male, when is he supposed to be sent for his low dose CAT scan to rule out lung cancer, a screening for lung cancer? Well, the answer is 55. That's what's in the book, and it's what it was until just recently, a few years ago, because I had mine a couple of years ago, and I thought, oh, well, I wasn't 55 yet, so it must be 50. I got the question wrong because the book still said 55. I'm like, don't you want to give credit for a student that actually knows what the most current information is? They're like, well, you know,
I would have given you credit, Scott. If you could,
appreciate
if you could show me that the guidelines have been updated, I would have given you credit.
So I
Yeah.
told that story to somebody, and they're like, my academic advisor, she said, oh, by the way, on the next chapter, do not search the internet for new congestive heart failure recommendations. Don't look at them. Whatever's in your book, even if it's old, learn that. But there are new ones, but don't look at them.
That I don't agree with,
Trust
right?
I don't
Well,
like that
I'll
either.
look at them in
Trust
clinical,
bad
but not for
information.
yeah.
But isn't there like we were able to challenge an exam question if we had 3 references that we could prove, because you're also wanting to educate everybody, right? I mean, the whole point
No,
is
you would think.
because textbooks, you know, just so you know, people don't understand, textbooks are based on they're at
They're
minimum
already
5
outdated
years
by the
old.
time they're published. Yeah.
Right, they're
Yeah, by
5
the time
years
they
old
hit
of knowledge.
publication, they're done.
I bring up the estrogen thing, the hormone replacement, because that was really a terrible piece of research on a very small population. I'm talking about things that just people get traction on in the news, nobody checks, and they
And it
just
never
are
comes
Well,
back.
I'll give
Never
you
they're
an
big
comes back to
self
tell you,
promoters. You know,
well,
they're
there's a lot of
Wine with dinner. Wine with dinner was one of them.
there's a lot of
Not for heart.
quackery out there. For example, with the whole like vaccines cause autism, right?
right.
So that gained traction and that was discredited. And the people to this that's led to a whole anti-vaccine movement.
Mhm.
People are not even vaccinating their bloody dogs. I just found out. Like
I read that, yeah.
I'm like, I will shoot your dog if it looks half rabid. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like apparently 50% where I live, and I'm like, are you kidding me?
Yeah, because
Like-
there is only a few things in the world that will absolutely kill you. We have no way of preventing it, and rabies is one of them.
God,
100% deadly. So yeah, you don't mess around with rabies.
Well,
I
but
don't know
so
why
are
people get
carrots.
rabies, but-
Scott, carrots are 100% lethal too.
No, I know where you're
No,
going.
they are. They are, because conclusive studies have shown that everybody who ate carrots between the years 1701 and 1702 are all now dead. Every one of them.
right?
None of
You
them
know
survived
what? You
carrots.
bring up a very good point about correlation and causation. There may be
Right.
a correlation, but there's no causation. And carrots are completely healthy. I encourage
But
everyone.
but I get what Scott is saying. Like that's
Don't
different,
mess with
you
rabies.
know.
Yeah,
But we can only do with with the information we have directly in front of us
Yeah.
right now. This is the
Yeah.
best
Yeah.
information I have. I have to make a decision now. Do I turn left or do I turn right? And 2 more steps, 6 more months from now, I may have different information. But I can't make this decision in 6 months. I have to make it right now.
Yeah.
So
I think it's
puts-
tough, and I think that's why we say, as like we are all critical thinkers.
Adrian, put it in the private chat.
Oh, sorry, yeah. So you know, because I'm one of these people because I really like trivia also. So I like to
love
really,
trivia.
So I like to look at things that are like debunked as well, and because you know you got Dr. Oz and people like that, and that are really good self promoters that you know have power, and people say, oh, that's compelling, you know what this person's saying, it must be the fact. And I just think because we're in a place in society where there's so little facts coming out to people. You know, we allow marketing of medications to people. Like the ads are, you know, basically go ask your doctor about this, and that's allowed in the United States, which really is then, you know, it's like, okay, well, who is the person that's educated to make that decision, right? So I think that's what I'm talking about. It's not like, oh yeah, we had bad, you know, like there's of course the evolution of knowledge and all of that stuff,
It-
right? But
it-
I'm saying the people that just blatantly make things up and then somehow it gets on, like, you know, in the Washington Post and then takes off on every news media, and then that person's on the news, and then it becomes like, well, okay, maybe there isn't a study to
I
debunk
mean,
it.
we saw it with COVID. I mean,
Well, yeah,
misinformation with COVID ran rampant. So
Well, but there was
right.
a problem with the real information too. I was just talking to one of the doctors in the office about this. Is we know, as people who are fluent in science, okay, that things change, as Chad just said. You know, today we think that you need to wipe down all the surfaces to prevent COVID. Then you learn, guess what? It's really not critical. We find COVID is really airborne. It's not really from touching surfaces and touching your nose so much. So let's not go crazy with the, with the wipes. But the thing is, when you have public policy to make and you have a public to communicate to, to them it can sound like you're changing your mind and you don't know what you're talking about.
yes.
Well, you said you had to do clean the tables yesterday. Now you say you don't. Then we need a mask. Now we don't need a mask. Oh, but we
And
need a special mask.
unfortunately, it led to a lot of public distrust because they don't
Exactly.
realize that science is constantly evolving and we're constantly
Exactly.
learning and that things always change.
Exactly. That's my
Like
point.
here, the hand dryers, air hand dryers, right? Giant, biggest spreaders of bacteria. The petri dish tests have been like mind blowing. You might as well just wipe your hands on your clothing.
I do. People look at me so weird.
But
They're
those,
like, "Where-"
those Dysons and all that, they did some petri dish tests.
They just blow the bacteria around. Yeah.
And then it's just blowing it all around, right? So again, you know, it's like the things that even seem intuitively like this must be correct.
Well,
We always have to think about all these things, right? I mean, nobody knew, even with COVID, like airborne disease. I mean, that was my, you know, area of expertise in California. And I was reading studies that were so mind-blowing about airflow, like how the molecules would go airborne, and how we as humans, like let's say a restaurant that had multiple rooms, right, that the airflow of people walking creates a current that then it would go and follow that current, turn a corner, go through a door. It is, you know, somebody open the door, well, that creates an air current, right? Or just people moving around. You know, that's like a higher level kind of thing that we don't think about, but that's so much how it got spread. People that were isolated in hotels where there was no contact, yet how did they, you know, and the airflow systems were different. It was because it was hanging out in the hallway when there was a famous study, three people that were quarantined, or four people. One was absolutely positive, two were quarantined across the hallway, and then they all became infected, and they traced the DNA to that one person because they figured out it was hanging out in the air. And then when he would open the door to get his food.
Well, yeah, that's why with TB, it's airborne. We have those negative air pressure rooms, but
Right.
we weren't doing that with COVID.
Yeah,
during COVID,
we know through TB.
I've played with a community band for over 10 years, and I was on the board of directors right as COVID hit, and I wanted to be part of the solution to getting us back together in person in a safe way. So I was in charge of leading the team that was crafting our COVID response policy, and we did research on things you would not even consider, like what is the behavior of particulate matter that comes out of the end of a bassoon, and compared to an oboe, compared to a trombone, just because they had a big hole at the end of it, does it mean that when you blow into it, all kinds of stuff comes out? Not really, not as much as you would think. Anyway, so there's a lot of very detailed research that we had to go through. That.
So did you find the longer the tool, the better?
We found the same thing, though. We didn't want to change things too often with the band. Oh, we found out this, let's change this. Oh, we found out that, let's change that. There'd be this mental whiplash, and they wouldn't know who to believe and what to know.
Right.
So we were very deliberate about making changes only when we thought they were, appropriate, and also not that often, so that people could keep up and also to maintain their trust in us.
Change fatigue. Change fatigue is real, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
I think that overload. right? Information overload. All you hear about COVID. What's the COVID news? And for 2 years, we heard COVID this, COVID that, vaccine this, vaccine that. And you're just like, I just want to go to work and come home and, eat my TV dinner. But
Right. I
life got very
know.
complicated for 2 years. And,
It's been,
you know,
and it continues to be, right. I mean, health in general, right? Healthcare. I mean, all of us are change agents in healthcare in our own ways, in our own communities, and we're all different places in the country. And I think it's, so important for people that are not in healthcare, or that are anybody, right? Keep pursuing the truth and knowledge, and yes, this algorithm may say take this drug, do this diagnostic, but in the back of your mind, always be questioning, like always be questioning what's the right way to do something, or what could be better, what are possible outcomes, why may this not work, why may, I mean with I have friends with long haulers that are having the most bizarre types of diseases going on that are just blowing my mind. Like, and I'm
Right,
like,
but along that line, Adrian, you get people that compartmentalize, be they Democrat, Republican, green, pink, blue, purple, whatever their thing is, and they're stuck here. And then the new knowledge comes along, and they're unwilling to accept the new knowledge and information because I know for sure that this is true.
right,
Well,
right.
yeah, but it's not true anymore. We've something has advanced. It's no longer true. Now you have to swallow this and let go of your old belief and say, okay, now we know this isn't true, and tomorrow this may not be true either, and we got to move on. So
Right.
there's a subtlety to it. There's a subtlety to it. I agree with you, Adrian. It's like question everything, but you can't question everything. I mean, at some point, you have to listen to someone you trust, and we're getting away from that in this country too. And that's a
But
whole other.
when new research comes out, I would say who funded this study, right? Those are the things to look at. Who
That's a
funded
big
this
thing to
study?
look at.
Do they have a bias? But
How
I
many
agree
people?
with you. Yes. What is
What was
your
your N?
sample size? And but I do agree with you, Nuskar. At the end of the day, though, if we question everything, then we would follow nothing. We
Right.
can't
No,
make-
absolutely. I'm just
Yeah.
saying, like, if you're a practitioner and you're seeing something that's not really working, it's not effective, right? It's not always a
Yeah.
one size fits all. It's thinking about what's different in this person's environment, their DNA, their makeup, their habits, their health history, whatever it might be, that isn't going to fit the norm. And as a patient advocate, right, that's something that I teach clients to do, is push on, lean into the healthcare providers to answer that question for you. Like,
And that
if
is
something's
exactly what
not
Scott
working.
was saying earlier. That's, do you give it twice or 3 times a day? Do you use this drug or that? And that's where the art
Right.
comes in.
I was just going to say that that's the art of healthcare and
Yeah.
medicine is.
I use everything I've learned in textbooks, and I add that with my experience and knowledge with your situation, and then I have to make a decision.
Right. I mean,
Because I have to
in your
factor all
field,
things in.
Mr. Midwife, right? I mean, the commodification and marketing that's happened around birthing and childcare, and don't breastfeed. Well, that was just marketing, right? Oh,
Yeah,
everybody needs
yeah.
a C-section. Well, that was just for convenience and money, had nothing to do with better benefits and health outcomes, right? So there's huge, big trends that go on for sometimes decades in healthcare that are completely accepted, but have not even any research. Nobody's even trying to pretend there's some benefit for the patient on these things, right?
Well, and that's where you look at the research, you look at the article in JAMA or whatever you're doing, and you say, okay, here's the information I'm giving, or have been given. Does that make sense with what I already know and have experienced?
Yeah.
Does this peg fit the hole? And maybe it doesn't. You're like, no, it's something about this. I can't tell you what it is, but something doesn't fit. And
well, it's hard. So, like breastfeeding, right? So, and for folks that don't know the history of breastfeeding, go look up Nestle and African countries, and that, right? This was about selling baby formula. This was 100% about selling baby formula that didn't have any research behind it. But then what do you have to do to demystify that, debunk it? Then you've got to go out and do a bunch of research that says yeah, the thing that humans have been doing for tens of thousands of years is actually the
Yeah.
thing they should be doing. So that's the hard part, because then you got to get funding for that. Well, guess what? Nestle's a pretty big company, right? You know, and they just when they airdrop baby formula all over African nations, right? And then created a dependence so that they could test out their baby formula. There's a whole history about that. Super easy to find, you guys. Anybody wants to look that up. But you know, that was all about baby formula.
But that's what I'm saying. You have to look at that study, you look at that information, you say, that doesn't make sense. We've been
And
doing it for
There was
2
no
million
study.
years this
There
way,
was
and it's
no
not
study.
making sense.
Yeah, but I mean,
No,
in that case,
use-
it was just marketing, right?
Use your own mind. You say this. What you're telling me doesn't make sense. We've been doing it this way for 2 million
And yeah,
years.
when you see
And you're
that
trying to tell me
Nestle
this stuff in a
funded the
can is better?
study,
Doesn't make sense.
Well, and it's also hard because then, you know, in that situation, right? Like it was poor women, it was poor mothers, right? It was, you know, oh, what is WIC going to pay for? What are the subsidies going to pay for? You know, it's all that kind of stuff. So we live in a complex world, and a lot of it is about selling something in business. It's not really about like necessarily what's best for us, right? Otherwise, we'd be eating ostrich and not cows. But, you know, so it's like, you know,
You know,
Well, there's
drinking
reasons
coffee is
why,
really, really bad for you, but we've been drinking coffee for a couple of hundred years, and
alcohol is
no
terrible.
real bad outcome.
It's illegal.
Right.
right. Don't
So-
take away my coffee.
You know,
Me
I mean,
either.
you look at
Don't
the
touch my
drug-
coffee.
look at the drugs that are outlawed, and yeah, they cause problems, and some cause really bad problems. But you know what causes? Alcohol is so destructive, but it is also such a part of our culture. We
Right.
tried prohibition, nobody would go for it. So it's now, believe it or not, whether we want to call it that, we're on a harm reduction model in the United States with alcohol. We allow people to drink
Sure.
it. We encourage them to only drink one or two. We encourage them not to drive when they're drunk. We, you know, all these things. But if we were outlawing harmful substances, alcohol would be illegal. It's terribly harmful,
Well,
but it's
drinking
also terribly
alcohol isn't,
culturally ingrained. So you know,
drinking
Yeah.
alcohol isn't bad. The Egyptians were drinking beer a couple of millennia ago, right?
well, for
It's not
them it was
drinking
they
it.
didn't have access to clean water. When
Well,
you don't have access to clean water,
exactly.
something with a little bit of alcohol in it is probably better. But
You've got
nowadays,
what you've got in front of you.
Yeah.
It's not the drinking of alcohol. It's the excess drinking of alcohol. It's the stupid stuff you do
that's what
after
they
you
want you
drink
to believe.
alcohol. That's where it all goes
the
wrong.
chronic-
No, that's what they want you to believe. It's not. You know, I'm saying any amount of alcohol is harmful.
Cellular
But what you're
damage.
saying is what we all hear, which is it's not alcohol, it's how much there is. You know, in fact, any alcohol is damaging, and we'd all be better off not drinking.
On a cellular, I mean, there are other fermented beverages that can be beneficial, right? I think if it's, I will
Yeah.
say, with exception Hefeweizen, a little, you know, couple ounces of Hefeweizen, especially for elderly people, for their GI tract, for good bacteria, it's a win.
That's
You know,
another area I'd like to see more research on too.
gut
is
bacteria, but I think,
probiotic
but I
stuff.
think, but all cultures have like fermented foods, right? So if we look at other, you
there's
know,
kimchi, there's kombucha.
Well, but all cultures
I-
had a history of having unsafe water to drink too, so they needed alternatives.
yeah, no, that's
Well,
In
true.
regards
Those who
to, I
didn't
did
have the
read,
alternatives aren't around anymore.
but I do. So, and then I was speaking with someone that struggles with alcoholism, and I have family members that have struggled with that.
Mhm.
And so I don't touch alcohol because I'm because of the genetic predisposition towards
Mhm.
addiction. I just don't want to touch it. But not only does it affect health, but also it can, with the addiction component, it just and it's in our society. It's just, I mean, so if you can have one or two drinks, one a drink a day, okay, good for you. But there's people that they just can't. They get addicted,
They
and
can't handle it, yeah.
unfortunately,
I kind of
it's
see that.
so it's such a cultural thing. Like
Yeah.
I've been looked at like I have 5 heads when I tell people I mean, I'm weird, I'm a vegan, I don't drink, like I recognize that, right? But it's like we should just accept as a society if people without questioning, right? I don't want to get into this, and this family member was an alcoholic, so I don't want to drink alcohol, right? We should
Right.
just accept when people say I don't want to drink.
People get
You know?
pushy about alcohol because I just lost my taste during menopause, so I just don't drink. And it
I
doesn't,
lost my taste after COVID. It doesn't taste. I haven't had a drink in almost
right?
4 years.
Isn't it
just
weird when you really lose your
doesn't taste-
taste for something and you're just like, how did that change
Yeah.
like that, right?
It's like I said, though, it's a
That
cultural
tastes
thing,
good.
and more in some cultures than others. I almost see the addiction thing as separate because people get addicted to all kinds of things. They get addicted to gambling. I mean, we should outlaw gambling. In a lot of places, they do, and for that reason. The places that, like my hometown, had gambling introduced, the riverboat gambling several years back, and it brought so much money into the city. So it's been good on that. But I'm still like, but here, my beautiful little, Midwestern town has this casino stuck. It's like a boil on the face of my beautiful little Midwestern town. But everything is good and bad. So alcohol, same way. It's cultural. You can get addicted to it, but you can get addicted to anything. It's also a business. If you just said, okay, no more alcohol, there's a whole economy built around alcohol as well.
There
So,
is.
this is, I mean, we don't need to get in the weeds on this topic,
That's exactly why.
Unless you're a
there's
descendant of the Dawson family, and then you actually legally under the federal government can make your own moonshine.
all these topics get very complicated because, should we, sell baby formula? Well, for some people it might be good, and others it's bad. It was taken, they exploited people when they first were researching it, but now is it better than mother's milk? I don't know. That's reasonable to think we could put things in artificially that the body doesn't produce that would be helpful. I don't know, but and then there's a whole economy. If we shut it down, who's out of a job? If we prop it up, who stands to profit? It's all very
well. I think it's always like emerging economies, right? Like we know what the big emerging economy is in America. For mind-altering substances, right? That it still blows my mind that people that there's so many things that are going backwards legally in so many states, yet they'll still vote to legalize that thing. And I'm like, this makes no sense other than, but there are some other health.
Well, it's kind of in line with the whole move away towards trusting experts and doctors and a little bit of the anti-vax feel and going towards probiotics and new age remedies, and cannabis is now the new panacea. Whatever's wrong with you, you should take THC or
rub some CBD on it. They'll say,
not true.
Right?
Not going to cure me.
We're going to find more and more medicinal uses and benefits from cannabis, but it hasn't been proven yet. But people act like it's a panacea.
It may help some individuals, but I can attest to the fact that I don't feel like it helps me at all. I mean, I don't do the THC part of it. I'll just do like the CBD oil, things like that. But honestly, I don't feel a difference.
Yeah.
I think it's standardization, right? If you don't have, it's like any supplement. If it's not, there's no standardization, right?
Mm-hmm.
Although I have heard people say good things about certain products for their dogs for anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
but again, it's all product by product.
Anything, Adrienne, that's the point. You hear people say good things about this, that, the other thing,
and then it's like, is that a placebo effect?
Research, and that's what so many people are basing their opinions on. It's like, oh, well, I saw on Facebook this really helps this, or a friend of mine used it on their dog and it helped, which is the way people talk. It's human nature, and I'm a big proponent of understanding human nature.
We're fully in the creator marketplace, right? I mean, that's the thing. It's like when people endorse things, that's why it's so important for, all of us to make content about like really the things that we're knowledgeable about, and to have people be thinking critically about that process. Like when I was going, I called Mr. Midwife when I was wanting hormone replacement therapy, although Dookie Howser, my new doctor, was like, wouldn't give it to me. And I was like, I've already got the list. I've got it right here. Just do that. Like what, after he spent he spent about 20, 15 minutes, staring at his phone, and then announced to me, I've actually never prescribed hormone replacement therapy. And I'm like, it's okay. I'll be the first. I'm willing. I'm signing up. So when I get insurance again, I'll be pursuing that. And thank you very much. So yeah, I mean, we just all have so much knowledge to share, but yeah,
well, we don't teach people as kids how to think critically and we have a science illiterate population, and that's a much bigger problem than I think we should discuss here. But
absolutely.
And I think part of that is why I think nursing school is so difficult at first, because we come from a school system that bangs into us rote memorization. And all of a sudden we get to nursing school and it's like, oh, you have to think critically now. And it's like, wait, I don't have to memorize A, B, C, D. You just
even in elementary school, I've got a little girl who's in 4th grade, and she comes home every now and again. Yeah, but my teacher said so. Because the teachers, even when I was a kid, they'd stand up there in class and say, listen to me, I'm telling you this, you have to believe me, I'm your teacher.
Right.
No critical thinking, no, what do you think about this situation? This is blue. It looks like green. No, it's blue. But it looks green. It's blue.
Most teachers have an ego where you can't prove them wrong, or you can't dissent
even
or disagree.
In nursing school.
Well, that goes back to nursing, not being able to challenge his teacher. Like, in education, we should be willing to let go of our egos and say, you know what, the guidelines have changed. I should have,
Yeah.
you know, I don't know.
I was
There's the other side of
intolerable. when
it. I
was a
talked to
student.
before I went, because if you don't know how weird I am, folks, if you're just meeting me,
We know.
I write emails with APA style footnotes. Okay, so
Are you serious?
Yes,
oh yeah,
he is.
so I'll
Yes,
write
he
my.
is.
I've written them to him too, but I'll write my instructor. I'll say I have a question about this particular item on the exam. I know this is what you're looking for. This is the reason I think this is what it was, because it was written this way. And also, here's what such and such has to say about it. Plus, it's in the book on page 582, the second column. Da 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 da, and lay out my. I should have gone to law school. I'm laying out my case.
I
Right.
tell
And
that
they
to my
come back.
husband all the time because I'm just like that too.
They come back and they say, well, we understand, but we think it's, we're only going to accept that one answer because of this, that, or the other. And before I went too many rounds on this question, I hope you'll find the end of this story funny. This is a short story. I talked to my academic advisor and I said, okay, do I want to be the guy that keeps going back and forth, or should I just let it go? Because I think I have a good point on this particular question. This is her answer, and she's like, yeah, she came to me with this. She was asking about it. She did consult with some of the other faculty about it, and she goes, let's just not go down that rabbit hole. She's like, come back up to ground level, go study for your next test, move along. I'm like, okay, I needed some reality check, because I know I can be that guy that's like, this isn't fair. You guys should choose things my way. And then, and I have to restrain myself. The question was, without giving away questions on the exam, it asked about what your best treatment is for a dental abscess. Funny thing, because we had this the other day now in clinical, and I knew the answer because we'd gone round and round with this test question. A, B, C, D, and one of the answers was to refer to a dentist for evaluation and treatment, and one of the other four was antibiotics. And I looked at it, knowing how tricky they are in some of these questions, and I said, well, I do want to send them to a dentist, but they asked for my treatment, and my treatment would be antibiotics, and I would also refer. But my referral, I don't think of that as my treatment. So we went back and forth on this. What is a treatment?
I'm with you on that.
What is referral? What is treatment?
So what
And
was
all
the
this kind of
answer?
stuff. Well,
It
she
was-
wanted us to say referral to a dentist. And I said, but you asked for my treatment, not for
Mhm.
my management or my referral or whatever. And I thought that was an
Yeah.
important word, because in another question you said a patient had a sudden fever, blah, 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 and it was flu, because flu comes on suddenly. And that word suddenly was important, and I missed it. So bad on me. But this one I said, aha, they said treatment. So I said antibiotics.
And
like,
I will.
I
So
would agree.
I used to work at a retail clinic that had pretty robust guidelines set, right? And our guidelines did indicate for a tooth abscess, we would, of course,
Mhm.
prescribe an antibiotic if appropriate, of course,
Mhm.
barring allergies, whatever, and refer, right? Because
Yes, you
it
do
will
both.
help.
So
Yeah,
but
it will
but
help
they
in the
and I would
meantime.
do both as well. I do both, but it asks for the treatment, and the treatment part is the antibiotic, and then the
No,
referral.
I think that question is
I even put
erroneous
on there,
and should have been
on
thrown
page
out.
on page 580 of our textbook, it says, and if there's other involvement, antibiotics should not be delayed. Anyway,
Yes,
here's the end of
exactly.
the story that I think is funny. After this, I'm like, okay, I'm not going to be a butthole about it. I'm going to let it go, whatever. I asked the instructor about another issue in class, and she came back. She goes, yeah, by the way, I looked at your exam. You got that one right. You said referral to a dentist. So the whole time I'm arguing on this question that I should get right, that I got right.
Oh, wow.
But I think it's really important to think about that's their job to write good questions.
But
I
that's not a
agree.
good, yeah, and that wasn't a good question.
Yeah,
I
that's
agree.
their job.
Well, and they do, to their credit, they do sometimes go and say, hey, you know what, we realize both of these answers can be considered right. We're going to give credit for each one. And also question, 32 and question 21, we realized were really not good questions. We're taking them out. You'll all get 1 point for each one.
Well, and I
So
think
they
if
do
you're
do
an
that.
analyzer kind of person, like I failed a class in my MBA that was one of the few classes that I had to it was all exams, because the one exam had the worst grammar and content, to where, depending on how you read it, it really changed the
Yeah.
meaning. But we
Yeah.
didn't have a process, because they were all practical exams, where there was no way to tell anybody about it. And I was like, this is ridiculous. I mean, there was a point I failed this one test 3 times. I had to pay, you fail like twice or whatever you got, and then you pay. And I was so annoyed. And I was like, and I gave them a lot of feedback about that. I was like, I go, because one, I can't do a screenshot. I can't tell the proctor. They don't care. They're just a proctor.
Yeah.
So there's no feedback process. So I think that is problematic. And, you have to come up with good questions, just like in assessing a patient, right? I mean, all of you guys are advanced practice. It's the questions we ask, right? That our patients that give us the best quality answer.
Yes.
So for anybody who wants to go into higher education, advance your learning, your nursing education, just know that part of the game is read my mind, and playing these kinds of games. Like, what do they really want from this question?
Yes.
Sometimes now they will tell you, look, I want you to write this essay and I'm looking for this, this, and this. And most of the assignments you get, all of them really have rubrics nowadays. This is what we're grading on. So almost a monkey could grade your paper. Did you do this? 2 points. Did you do, oh, you missed that? That's minus 1 point.
Right.
So it's not just, yeah, I like this paper, I'll give it an A. Or, no, this person's on my nerves, I give it a C. There are actual criteria. So there's that. But there's always an element of, or humans writing test questions are going to make mistakes or not write them the way we like to read them, I guess.
Or it could be AI. Maybe, maybe AI. Those are things that AI will do a better job at, I think.
Maybe. But in this case, there's that. And there's the idealistic part of me that's like, this is the way that education should be run and questions should be like this and da-da-da-da-da. And then guess what? There's the real world.
The reality.
The real world is, you've got a 38-year-old nurse who's trying to get her doctorate and teach this graduate level class, and 2 kids and a dog, and she's got 100 emails from students going, I think this question was wrong. I think this question was wrong. I want more advice on this. How do I study for this? Your class is too hard. And finally, you're just like, enough.
They're not being compensated. By the way, they're not being compensated at all.
They are not.
Well,
They are not being compensated at all. The amount of money that nurse educators make is pitiful. It's very sad.
Any educators. I mean,
that's what plan B is to go and do, instead of the nurse practitioner, is to do nursing education. And I started looking like, I wonder what kind of jobs are out there, and the salaries are insulting. But that is,
They are.
Yeah,
I can make more teaching CNA than I could teaching nurses.
You make the same amount of money bedside pretty much as an educator, honestly.
yeah,
Getting back to like
a little less.
what Mr. Midwife was saying about his kids, because you're the only one that has kids, I think, right? Of all of us. So so you've been through a lot of education, but I think it's really important, like if you have, this is why parents need to teach their kids critical thinking. And I remember my father basically telling me at one point, like, look, school, and I might have been like 3rd grade, like, school is just going to teach you what they want you to know. And here's like a set of knowledge, but that knowledge is just a piece of a bigger universe of knowledge. But this is what they want you to learn.
Good dad.
But it doesn't even mean that that's like the truth.
I always had a balanced perspective because, let's be honest here, and especially now with what's going on now, the history you learn in school is very different from what actually happened. We romanticize in the States, they romanticize Christopher Columbus and all this. And then I'd go home and my dad would be like, here's what really happened.
Right.
Well, I mean,
I had the advantage. I had the advantage of a
everywhere.
Catholic education from like 2nd grade to 11th grade. And I got to college and I took a biology class. I'm like, oh, we did this in high school. So I realized I really did have a quality education at the Catholic school. And as much as you would think at a Catholic school, they would be wanting to indoctrinate you into the faith and all that. We had religion class, but my school actually had a critical thinking course that we came in on a Saturday and did. And I couldn't tell you what we did, but I remember there was a critical thinking thing. And so, if I didn't pick it up from everything else, we actually did have a class on that. And so that's something that could be offered, but not enough schools do.
But it's not just the United States that romanticizes history. In Russia, Lenin is a god, and we know he messed things up. So
right, history is written by the winners.
And where
exactly
you are,
right.
there's always going to be bias depending on where you're learning your history from.
But there's things they just leave out. Like I just said, I had this great Catholic education up and through high school. It wasn't until I was 29, 30 years old, moved to California, was involved with the college there, working for them and all this stuff, that I knew about the Japanese internment during World War II.
Right. Most people don't know about the Italian internment.
And I'm like, Mom, how did I never learn about this till I was 30 something
Right.
years old, but it wasn't included in the, we learned plenty else, but I thought that would be something you would include.
A
So
lot of people that aren't in California don't know about that. I
yeah,
mean, maybe more with social media. I think, on TikTok, there's some really good channels on tidbits of history. But yeah, I
this
mean,
was
Canada
way
interned Italians for
really.
the same reason,
Mm,
right? That's what actually caused a lot of Italians to also come down into the United States, right? I mean, there's a lot of,
mm.
people don't even understand the formation of the United States. They don't understand, you know, what part was Mexico? Right? I mean, it's like you can't take people that have always been here. They didn't come across the border crossed them, like, I mean, I know lots of people that are from New Mexico, Texas, Arizona areas that,
Mm.
their families of hundreds of years go back.
That's true. Now, I went to school in the Midwest, and so the things they emphasized there may have been very different than the
You're
things
like,
they emphasized and it was also 30 something years ago. So, the times change as well.
yeah, it's like the formation and development of the United States and the history of all that is, or just Florida, right? Florida was like carved out and like kind of who owned Florida? Who
It
was
wasn't it the Spanish first? They
Spain.
owned
Spanish for the Spanish, yeah, but then was it
Wasn't
the
it Seminole Indians that owned it?
French?
well, I mean, it depends on how far back we're going because
Right,
the
but I mean,
Indians
like
owned everything
Florida,
before.
Florida was
Neanderthal.
kind of the last holdout, I think, of Spain, but I'm not even sure about that. It is really complicated. I'm not even saying I understand because obviously I don't listen to me. But it's like, how do we end up with Alaska? How
Yeah,
do
so Florida was under colonial rule by Spain from the 16th century to the 19th century.
right, which is pretty long, right? So it really, that's why Florida kind of escaped slavery a little bit as well.
Well,
I
yeah,
mean, it
but
was
before the Spaniards got there, the Neanderthals had it. So, I mean, who's
Oh,
to
wow.
say?
right. And so Irene, so this is really interesting. If you're from Los Angeles, I wish I knew the name of this book. There was an amazing book I once read about so the Japanese people in Los Angeles occupied what is known as South Central Los Angeles, South LA. And
Same
when
here
they
in
were
San Francisco.
interned, all their houses were empty. So there's actually a lot of houses in South LA that still have some design elements, the Japanese elements, but at the simultaneously they were developing downtown, the Broadway corridor, where the whole black population lived. And so guess what? They took all the black people. They said, here's a bunch of houses in South LA, because back then that was kind of the boonies, actually. When we think about it, people would like to go from downtown LA to San Pedro was like a really far distance.
The
There
same
was
thing happened in San Francisco. The Fillmore was
yeah,
where the Japanese Americans lived, and when they were all removed, the black population went in and bought some cheap houses. I mean, they were smart, right? Go where the cheap
right.
real estate is. That's where they stand today. When the Japanese came back, they actually settled just kind of next to there, and that's where we have Japantown in San Francisco.
It's crazy because ironically in LA, Little Tokyo sits on a historic site of the first black development
Hmm.
in LA. So it was like this reverse. So when Japanese came back, it's like it's kind of wild. And then we won't talk about Chinatown in LA because that's all just fake. That's just a movie set. So it doesn't really
But back to healthcare.
yeah. So yeah, so interesting. I love history. I love, the history. I mean, it was crazy when I was working as a union organizer, I met a nurse who was down in like the San Pedro area, and her family was from that area. And because the rivers, there's two big rivers, right, that used to run and flow before they were all concreted up. And she said, oh yeah, my uncles used to ride around on their horses and kill coyotes and wild dogs and shoot them like through South LA. And I'm just like,
Hmm.
what? Like this, this was like in the 50s and 40s, I guess. But yeah, it's pretty wild. It's the development is in the West is a lot more recent than in the East. Here I'm like, surrounded by the Civil War.
But no knowledge. I mean, we're talking off topic, but any knowledge is never wasted. Whether you are,
No.
into Civil War
No.
history or World War II history or American history or, fluid dynamics or mechanics or engineering or whatever it is. I mean, it all tends to come together. And the more you can think about one topic, your brain knows how to think about other topics. It's that fluid intelligence that psychologists talk about. It's the ability to
Yeah.
just manipulate ideas. Doesn't matter what the topic is.
It's stimulating. No, absolutely. I mean, my dad was a 10th grade dropout and ended up working on the space shuttle. So,
Oh, wow.
because he was really self-taught. I mean, he was, this was a guy who just, was obviously very smart,
And
but
I was dropped out of the space shuttle in 10th grade. So
and you were dropped out of it. I know,
Wow.
right? It's the collision of like, hey, there's a
yeah,
booming, the booming Cold War and aerospace program, and then all these jobs in California, right? And so it was just the perfect storm. Yeah. Oh, yeah. 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 1920s Boyle Heights. Oh, yeah. Definitely. 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 Very big history there. So, Mr. Midwife, I wanted to ask you a question. So, back to your degree, which is really
Yeah.
amazing. Are you weaving that program in with your current position, like your capstone project, or is it, or are you like, how, what are you,
So
studying?
I
What are you doing? Let's talk
so the place I'm currently working, and I've been in close contact with many other people in the facility, and we've kind of I brought up a subject. I said I think this part is broken. I think we need to focus because something has to change here. And everybody that I talked to said, "Yeah, you're
I mean,
absolutely right."
in the workflow of the organization itself.
Yes, the workflow of the organization.
Gotcha.
They
Gotcha.
said this is absolutely a problem. It's been a problem for a long time. I said, well, I think looking at this globally, the 30,000-foot view, I think it's probably a communication problem. They said could be. So part of what we're going to do starting next week or 2 weeks from now, we're going to get everybody, all the department heads together and drill down on this. And I think it's a communication problem. But as we
Okay.
drill down, we may decide it's not communication at all. Communication is a symptom of much deeper problem. And if we can
Structural,
get in
something
there,
structural.
yeah, something structural. So hopefully, we'll identify the problem or what we think is the problem. We will come up with a solution on how to fix it. Is there a patch? Is there a communication tool? How are we going to fix this? Implement that tool over the next term and see if that fixes it. Whether or not it does is irrelevant, but we go through the process, and then the last term is write up our results.
That's
and
awesome.
if they're good enough, we will publish the results.
That's great. I love it. That's awesome. And now, do you have to work with a cohort, or are you kind of solo in your program?
So this is a project that you have to have a mentor and a sponsor. So at least a minimum of 2 people in the organization, they're going to work with you. Ideally, you've got a small quorum or committee, half dozen people that are like, for example, department heads, that if it's going to affect you and your unit and who you're overseeing, I want you included so that we can iron out all the wrinkles, so we can truly identify what we think is a problem. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's not communication. Maybe it's something else. And this isn't supposed to be a toy project. It's supposed to be a real change, a real identifiable problem with a real identifiable possible solution, and go from there.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I think it's one thing. I was during the pandemic, I was going to get my MSN or finish my MSN, but I had a roadblock because I wasn't I wasn't working. I was working for myself. It's really hard in some situations to do those capstone projects if you're not in a facility, really specifically almost a hospital or some kind of direct care environment. I mean, I wouldn't have been able to do it working home health. I wouldn't have been able to do it as a CNA instructor, and so that's
I'm
something
learning that too, that there's a real importance to networking. I mean, as far as like when I found my preceptor, I went, I called everybody and their brother, and the school tried to help me and all this. And then of course the one I got dropped me and whatever. But the way I found one was the nurses organization, the NP organization that I've been going to almost every month for the last year and learning stuff and getting a $10 steak dinner, to be honest with you. But that paid off when I stood up and said, hey, I'm in trouble. And one of the hands went up in the back and said, talk to me. I think I can help you. And she turns out to be the most amazing preceptor in the world. And I can't say enough good things about her. So, and it's networking. And last month, I said, I'm also going to need PEDS and possibly GYN experience because they don't do that here as much. And people are like, oh, I think so-and-so. Let me talk to so-and-so. Let me take your card. And I'm like, look at me networking.
Relationships are really important. And having, and then like what you're talking about, Mr. Midwife, like creating some identifying a problem, figuring out a solution, executing the solution, studying it to see if it solves it. And then, is this a problem that can be solved in other places that other organizations may
right.
have, and then being able to translate that. So this is why, advanced education is so important, is that you expand the body of knowledge, right?
Well,
On the issue.
and Adrian, I'm
Rewarding
going to talk
too.
to you.
It's
I'm
what's
going to talk to you
rewarding about
personally
research.
because go
Hold on,
ahead, Scott.
Mr. Woodruff
You go
go.
first.
I just want to say quickly, I did research in it was on nothing important in the universe, but I did research in when I got my BA in psychology, and it struck me one day working on all this stuff. I'm not just finding knowledge, I'm creating knowledge.
Mhm.
This wasn't the answer to my question, wasn't in a book, and I finally found that book. We don't have an answer until I actually do all this stuff, and then I will give the universe the answer to this question. And that was a bit heady, I have to say, not to get
Mhm.
too weird about it, but that's the reward of research is actually creating an answer that nobody knew before.
Mhm.
So, Adrian, specifically to you, over the year and a half that we've known each other, you've always been a huge agent for change. Sometimes you get to the point where I've got a can of gas, I'm actually going to burn this place down. That's just how you are.
I came out like that, just so you know. I was like that at 4. I was like that at 4.
So-
I got kicked out of Bible study when I was 4 years old.
Well, there's that.
Not surprised.
But sometimes it's going through the process and knowing how to change things.
Mhm.
But also at the end, and this sounds pompous, but it's not, that title at the end, that doctor, gives you some kind of credibility. And so
Yep.
when you go in there with your can of gas and a match, you say, I am Dr. Adrian. I'm here to tell you what we're going to do next, what we're going to try.
Mhm.
People will tend to listen to you because you are a doctor.
Yep.
And it's like I said, it sounds pompous, but especially somebody like you who wants to change, who's eager to change and wants to do things differently.
But
Yeah.
then that comes into, when are we using that title doctor for, in what
In academic settings, when you get contracted with a hospital,
Yeah.
the hospital calls
Or
you up and says,
workplace.
we've got this problem, we need you to
Mhm.
come in and consult on this problem. She goes in there with her committee. She's got a committee of people sitting around. She can say, I'm Adrian RN, or she can say, I'm Dr. Adrian.
Mhm.
And
It's
people
weird
tend to perk
because-
up just a little more.
It's interesting because, having the MBA, which is a terminal degree, right? Pretty much. It's interesting in that healthcare space. But I agree. I mean, that's just the way of the world, right? Like girls, yeah. Oh, I got cut at brownie level. I didn't even make it to the Girl Scout. Let me just tell you, because I was like, these projects are stupid. The boys are doing cool stuff. They're making wood stuff. I don't want to do a glue project with buttons on a box. That's dumb.
I made it to Weeblo and then it was out.
So yeah. Did we freeze? Did I freeze?
it looks like,
You
yeah, it looks
froze.
like you froze.
Freeze every once in a while. It's no big deal.
Oh, yeah.
Usually resolves itself.
I do agree. I do agree that having that doctorate degree, but then kind of like the other side, it does give you more credibility, opens more doors for you occasionally.
Mhm.
But then a lot of times it's like, oh, you're just a DNP. I've seen that too. Like, oh, well, it's in nursing, so it doesn't count.
Mhm.
Well, I was
That's
going to kind
also
of say
true.
the same
That's
thing,
also true.
not to belittle you, Adrian, but in healthcare, we're like, oh, an MBA. First of all, everyone and their brother has an MBA, and second
Right.
of all, that's business, and which is anti-healthcare, right? We don't want to deal with
Right.
the business side. We're talking about people's lives here, so
Right.
that may not carry as much
I'm gonna
gravitas
let's see.
as
She's still frozen.
I think it's
Yeah.
my whole situation. I don't know why StreamYard does not like my computer.
We can hear you. We just
yeah,
can't.
we can
see
hear you
you.
fine.
Oh, she's
But it
logged out.
depends. It depends on the credentials and who you're talking to. The other with Chad, the other thing that you and I have going for us, aside from being men, is a little bit of gray, and
It helps.
and I
Men
know
and
it
white
helps.
and
and
older.
men-
You guys are the trifecta of
older.
authority.
And if you wear a tie and you kind of carry yourself with some, a certain way,
Mhm.
people listen to you. And if you've got a doctor in front of your name, then even more so. So
Right.
my preceptor kind of brought that up. She was saying something about the patriarchy. I don't know if she was kidding or not. And I'm like, well, I try to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. She was like, some women patients aren't going to want to have you, in the room. And I'm like, that's completely their decision. She's like it or not, you're part of the patriarchy. I'm like, I'm not exactly part of the patriarchy. I have no real power in the world. Okay. But I said, I do try to be part of the solution, not the problem. I try to treat women equally, try to be aware if I'm stepping over women when they're talking, simple things like that. and you know,
And I don't think you guys are either of you. I don't think either of you are part of the problem. But the issue is that implicit bias that just because you look a certain way and because your skin's a certain way, automatically you're going to carry more authority, more respect, possibly have more opportunities.
So it's incumbent upon us to use our power for good and not evil, is what I'm saying. And
Absolutely.
I've tried to do that. Mr. Midwife is a huge advocate for women and their rights. So
yeah,
I can do more, but I at least try to treat everybody equally and be aware. I mean, I was in a store and I asked somebody at the store where something was, and the woman at the counter is who I asked, but the man standing next to her answered, "Oh, it's in aisle 3." I was like, I thought I asked her. So I went to aisle 3, but when I came back, I told her, I said, "I saw what just happened where he answered for you. I'm really sorry that happened." And she looked at me like, "You mean you saw that? You understood that?" And I went to the guy too and I said, "You probably don't know you were doing this." But I asked her. And, you know, sometimes when women get talked over, it tells them, you know, I'm the man, I know better. It's mansplaining kind of thing. I said, "You're not a bad guy. You didn't know you're doing it." So I don't know. It was kind of weird for me to do that, but I felt like this was a situation where I could point something out that maybe he didn't realize. So that's what I mean when I say not to, you know, I'm not trying to put on a red cape, but I'm just saying that I do try to be sensitive and you know, we all can do little things like that, you know.
Yeah, I think that like where we can use our privilege, it's really important, right? I mean, I think this is why it's so important to create content. You know, I'm becoming much more aware of creating content that speaks to men because I think there's a huge vacuum as far as because women are such big consumers, anyways, right? And in general. But I think that wherever we can use our privilege, it's really important that we do so to call things out. I mean, like my mother was in a wheelchair my whole life, pretty much. So in the public sphere, my mother was always in a wheelchair. So it was all, so even as a child, right, people were talking to me over her and I would constantly be like, I would just stand there and just ignore them and just stare at them.
Yeah.
Right. Which was technically being rude as a kid. But I was like, she's the adult. I don't know how old you think I am, but like, you need to speak to her. Like she's in a wheelchair. She's not deaf. Right.
Yeah.
She's not, otherwise mentally disabled or something. Right. So, and that was I just have to say disabled people are just completely treated like trash. And I have not seen that any kind of real progression there in our society, which is really unfortunate about accessibility and stuff. But that taught me a lot as a young person, as a child, because, it's not about like identity politics and all that, but it's about, people that are differently able, disabled, however they, are in society. There's so much discrimination. It's crazy. We see it today with people trying to fly with wheelchairs.
But if we're in a position to say, hey, let this person speak for themselves, just that little thing can be ally work. That little thing can be, using your power for good. And, like the comment, it's hard when you're used to calling everybody honey and sweetie, and you have to really judge how people. I think who was I talking to? We were talking about hugging in the clinical setting, and some people are huggers and some aren't, and that kind of thing. You have to again treat every person as an individual. You don't. Oh, they're 80 years old. They're going to appreciate a hug from a young guy. No, maybe not. But sometimes you can just read that people are like, "Are you doing okay? Yeah, okay." And you give them a little side hug, and it's like, then you don't do it ever again. Sweetie, honey, I used to do that in the hospital all the time.
I feel like I spent years trying to get that out of my vernacular as a nurse because I didn't realize that because I became a nurse at 39. So I wasn't really a touchy-feely kind of person, but I realized I was using some of that vernacular, right? So then I spent years getting rid of that vernacular. Then I moved to like the South.
Forget about it.
I'm like, it's like a whole other level, right? But yeah, I think it's just important. It doesn't cost anything to ask people, hey, how do you want to be, addressed?
Or just
even with gender, because it's so funny how there's such an issue about gender, yet my entire life, including today at Costco, I was, yes, sir, I'll be right with you. Oh, whoops, sorry. Yeah, I'm like, hey, these are a size D. I don't know what kind of man you're around, but like, that's cool. I don't know.
You need
Like,
to push those up where they can
I
be
don't know what the
seen.
man boobs are looking like in your world, but
Oh my
you know,
God.
there's
With
no
obesity being
gynomasty.
rampant, with obesity being so rampant, there are men who are full in the chest as
Oh
well.
my God, I'm dying.
I had to make everybody laugh with that. I like to make.
Did you go like hot like?
I was like, hey, hey, whoop, hey, like.
Hey,
Oh my
but
God.
that doesn't help. It doesn't help to go, hey, and point to your breast. You have to go,
I mean, yeah, it's pretty funny. Yeah.
lower your voice and point to your breast would be confusing.
Yeah, but it's always like when I turn around, and I get
Oh
it,
my
I have short
gosh.
hair and all that, but it's just funny to me. I'm like, I've been dealing with that since I was like 5,
Mm.
like since I was a little kid, So yeah, it's just my whole life. I'm like, okay, I'm just, then I'm going through menopause. So
And you have
basically, I'm turning
to
into a
live-
man. So
And to live, yeah. And yeah, your cardiovascular risk is going up. It doesn't matter if you have breasts or not.
facial hair, all of it.
That's true.
Yeah. You know, and to live a happy life, you have to decide what are you going to be offended by and what are you not going to be offended by. Every time,
You
and
can be
it's
offended by anything and everything.
Yeah.
if you decide to be a miserable person and get mad every time this happens at Costco, you will be. But sometimes you got to go.
I can't even. It's just so much a part of my life. I don't
Yeah.
even. Now some people have used it and said things to me that are derogatory, and then I'm like, yeah. Did you say? I'm sorry. Did you say you wanted to step outside? No problem. Let's go on outside, right?
Yeah.
So it's like. So of course there are people who are kind of dumb, but mostly it's so weird, the signifier of even short hair, how
Yeah.
how much that is. But I wonder, do guys get that with longer hair? Like, I don't know.
Probably.
Like, do guys get it?
Probably.
Like, can I help you, ma'am? I don't
know.
I don't know. It's just weird. Like, I don't have a guy's body, at all. So
I've been wanting to grow my hair long, so I'll grow it and I'll report.
grow it out. Let's see. Yeah. I mean, I'm
Personally,
gonna have,
I can only speak to my experience. I've never thought a man with long hair was a female.
I haven't
I have.
either.
I have.
Yeah.
Well,
Of course, I run with a different crowd.
but now guys have like, I think also because guys are so into facial hair now. So it's like they've got the long hair and the beard, the mustache, like, but in the 80s and 90s, it was, I think, there was, but then it was like the grunge look. I don't know.
Or if you see someone from the back or just you glance at them, your first cue. And this is what we do. This is psychology, right? We learn cues. We encode long hair, female, short hair, male.
Yeah.
Because guess what? Most of the time, you're right.
I mean,
that's why eyewitness testimonies are so inaccurate, because your brain will make this picture and then it's completely inaccurate.
Oh, it is. And that's a fact. There's so much research about that. And I have facial recognition. So maybe because I have like amazing facial recognition, I just never forget a face. I can see 1,500 versions of Scott and be able to pull Scott out of a lineup. It's just I have that ability. I don't
Scott, how many lineups you been in?
3.
Okay.
3 lineups, right? Yeah. No, I know. And Irene saying she was misgendered as a kid. I know. It's like, yeah. So, but yeah, it's,
I did want to touch on something that Jay Michael said. He said that a lot of times he'll get looks when he parks in handicap parking, because maybe, so it's important to lead with empathy and know that a lot of disabilities are not visible always, or people, like, my feet constantly hurt. I was talking to my husband about maybe if I go to Disney, I need to be in one of those like scooter things, like those motorized ones.
Oh yeah, you've had that. Is it a neuropathy? Like, did you ever get any?
I have I have Sjogren's, which doesn't help, but I also have chronic like plantar fasciitis. So my feet, I can't like run. I don't run. I don't jump. Like, it hurts to walk. So, if someone, you can't judge someone by just looking at them on what their disability is. So be kind. And Jay Michael, congratulations to you. He's going back to school for his MSN.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I'm not sure what track he's going, but whatever track it is.
That's awesome.
There's a point I made in a recent video. I don't talk much about my chronic pain in my videos, so I made a video where I did talk about it. Yeah, and the point I made about hidden disabilities is because I had a conversation with my neighbor once. He goes, "Oh yeah, your disability. I saw you carry that furniture up the stairs." I'm like, "Yeah, you know what you didn't see is the next 2 days I was sitting on that furniture, unable to move, popping pain pills." So if you see someone park at a parking spot for handicapped people and they've got a tag and they bounce right out and shuffle up to the store, that may be their one good day this week that they're
Yes.
getting some shit done.
100%. 100%.
And
They
chronic
may be
pain, chronic
in that
pain
moment.
comes in waves, right? It's not always
Right.
the same pain the same day.
Yeah. So you
Yeah.
may be seeing them on their good day. Yeah, you're right. Today they're not disabled. They're getting things done.
Compassion,
But the rest of the week,
compassion and empathy go a long way. 100%. 100%.
it's
But
hard.
yeah, I mean,
It's hard.
we used to just bring out my mom's extra wheelchairs and like just all go to the store in the wheelchairs. And I was doing, jackass at like a very young age. I just want to
I was
say.
thinking about that. I've always wanted to go to Disney World. I'm like, I don't know if I could be on my feet that long, but maybe Bridget and I can get matching chairs and we can zip.
There we go. Paint
Well,
the
they have
town
all
with
those like
fire.
Get to the front
those
of the
chairs
line that way.
that when you go to like the grocery store and stuff, that they're like,
Yeah.
I've definitely gotten in those. Yeah. But no, that's awesome, J. Michael. That's so executive nurse leader. Good for you.
Good.
Yeah. I think it's, advancing education is super important. I just, I want somebody else to pay for it. So it's,
Your future self pays for it if you do it right.
yeah.
You
I
know.
mean, it's
I'm
not
running
about
up the hills
money.
now going, I need to be making that NP money here sometime in the next couple of years.
I think that,
Pay myself
it's not about the income. Like, I just think income wise, you'd be shocked what MPs are getting paid here. It's crazy. It's less than RNs, it's pretty bad. But I think it's, about personal desire. Do you have challenges, because honestly, if I was going to do any grad school, the easiest one would be MSN, but probably what I would do is law school, but I don't know,
Yeah.
Who
You'd be
knows? I might
great.
be in
I
Mexico.
do know. Well, we have that. What's her name? Lori. She's is she an NP but she's a
No,
lawyer.
she's an RN.
She's
She's
an RN.
RN.
But she's been a lawyer for a long time. Yeah. I mean,
But
I
I'm
know,
really good with like statutes and stuff, so I think that would have been a good career for me, lawyer. But hey, I'm already
There's
done
different
this.
types of law too. There's the kind that actually argues cases, which actually they don't do much anymore from what I understand.
5%.
They all settle out of court. There's a lot of preparing contracts, and there's like patent
Yeah.
law and intellectual property, which I think is interesting because
Lawyers always make money.
But there's wills and estate planning and all that kind of stuff. It's like
Yeah.
basically there's a
Oh.
bunch of rules, and can you understand those rules?
That's
and help
nice, J.
people
Michael.
navigate?
He
Oh,
has
you
a rich
do.
uncle. Big.
Yeah.
Oh
Must be
yeah.
nice.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, exactly. You have to, we have to lead with empathy and compassion. And, I think this system in the United States of education is just so interesting. We just have to figure out a different way to like structure, the payments and stuff. And, I'm
we
really,
didn't. I do like the education is so important, but then I know people that there's no way they will ever pay off their student loans. So that's not right either. It shouldn't.
yeah, I
Education
never will.
should not just be available for the wealthy.
No,
Yeah.
but I've been talking to my niece. Okay, she
Mhm.
wants to go to. She just started college this fall, and not as familiar with like how to finance it and all this kind of stuff. It can be done, and she wanted to go to the big university in her state, has a 4-year experience, with the big football games. And I'm like, you know what? Guess what? You may not be able to afford it. But you
Right.
know what else? It may not be such a bad thing. I wanted to go to a big school. I went to a small regional university, and I had an amazing time. You make the experience where you are.
Right.
Yes, it's a different experience, but you have an experience.
Oh,
where you
it's
are.
because J. Michael, thank you for your service. He's like Sam, so he's probably in the service. So that's what he's talking
He's a
about.
veteran.
That he did his time, and then they're going to pay for his education.
Oh, you're getting GI Bill. That's awesome.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
know.
no, I mean, I think paying for school, like, I mean, I have a lot of student loans. I'm not going to lie. And so, I just had to restructure some of my student loans, and I'm like,
Did they get canceled though? Did they get forgiven? They just did that thing. If
No.
you've been paying for 20 years or more or whatever.
None of mine got canceled, but I did
I know
kind of
somebody
what
who
you
did.
did, Scott. Like I forewent the prestige of a good school. I went. You guys know that. Well, I've talked about my first career was acting. Like I moved to New York, I went to school for acting, then I decided to do something else. I came back to Florida. So I didn't want to spend a whole bunch of money. So I started at a community college, and then then I went to university. I stayed at home the whole time. I never had that college experience when it, but I'm not in debt to the degree that my colleagues are. Some of them, I don't know. Some have told me I don't think I can ever pay off this debt. Like I literally within the next month, I will probably pay off my entire debt. I'll be done.
That's awesome. I mean, I think it's not it's the interest, right? That there's just no cap on the interest, the just like, medical debt, right? It's like now they're just starting to talk about capping interest rates on that. I think it's just that compounding interest component of loans that, they can really add up. And I mean, I had some people I know somebody who got all of their loans, just
Forgiven?
they're not, forgiven. They're not a nurse, they do something totally different in education. But yeah, I mean, so some people can, but also a lot of those programs were so overburdened. They were just a crap show to even get information on. The government really failed it. There's just a total failure at like being able to onboard people into those, some of those programs.
Well, the one that just came out, I don't know all the details, but I got a letter, and people that have been paying like 20 or 25 years, depending.
Yeah.
If you've been paying them that long and you still pay, they're canceling them, and they're going. So anyone who's got student loans, you've been paying on them that long, talk to your loan servicer, because you may have to enroll into like a what do you call it, income-based repayment program, whatever,
IDR,
cancel it or whatever, or what, I'm not sure the details, but check on it. It's out there. I'm telling my sister that too. She ran into the problem of borrowing for school and taking a few classes in college, but then not finishing. So she doesn't have the degree that will get her higher income to be able to pay the loans off. And so she's still struggling these years later.
Yeah.
Trying to tell my niece, you're making your first real decisions as an adult. You're buying your first car. You're taking out your first loans, your first credit card. People, will make bad decisions at your age, and they'll never get out from under it. They're always going to have debt and credit card debt, and they take out from this to pay for that. Let's get you started, making good decisions. So
I think that's what's so scary, because when you're so young, you're making decisions that could impact you for the rest of your life. And who you are at 20 or 18 is very different from who you are at 30,
Yeah. And they're and they throw credit cards at you. I mean, I had that happen when I was younger in college, but I think that, I mean, you have to deal with a lot of different things in life, right? I mean, I've, have made some good decisions, some not so great decisions, some just decisions that were expensive because it's not cheap to get married and get divorced. And so, it's like, there's just some things that are inevitable that, are very expensive. My two ex-wives invested in me. I invested in the stock market, but you split all the assets and you take on all the debt. That's the other thing. So if you get together with somebody that has $100,000 in student loans and you get divorced, guess what? You're getting 50 grand of those student loans you're going to take on. So so there's a lot of things that you have to think about. You got to think about those decisions that you don't want to think about often in the front end of certain situations. So,
and if you're a parent, just talking to your kids about this at an early age so that they don't,
and not getting your kids into debt, not getting your kids in, because I've seen some people who like have their kids take out loans and all this stuff. And when they didn't even need to, it's not even necessary. And then even if you're investing and you have those student savings accounts, right? A lot of people have just taken a big bath on those and lost a lot of money. Now they're scrambling. How are they going to pay for their kids' education? But it's important to understand, like, we are required to know a lot of things. Like, we're all required to be financial managers now. You know what I mean? It's like, that's a lot to manage, and to understand the difference between health savings accounts, how they change over time. What are your max income to contribute to IRAs, all that kind of stuff. Right. And, all those different types of accounts.
If you're 18 years old, listen to people who want to help you.
Listen to the older people.
I offered all summer, and then came fall, and my mom said, she needs some help. She's not sure she can pay for college. I'm like, where were you all summer? I offered to help you. I am the guy. I can't help you.
Here's a tip: put the max in your IRA in a Roth IRA.
On financing college, but
put the max in a Roth as you can, because you're always going to pay more taxes.
I guess my point is, when you're young, sometimes you don't want to listen to anybody else.
Yeah, you think you know it all when you're young. You think you do.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. And I think, but now it's such an opportunity for people to have side hustles. So, I'm like, there's no excuse. Have a side hustle somehow. But yeah, so we should do a financial show.
Community college, best kept secret in education, community college.
Community
Yeah.
college, absolutely,
I
100%.
mean, it was looked down upon when I was in school. That's for kids that couldn't get into real college, junior college.
It's all the same classes.
You had to live at home. So, yeah, you don't go away and live in a dorm and go to football games on the weekend with your fraternity. But you get an education, and you're going to have to go for your last 2 years anyway if you're going to do a 4-year degree. So it's just, and you're going to come out owing so much less and going to a small. I'm such a fan of state schools. I've gone to a couple of them in a couple states, in Missouri and in California. And there's nothing wrong with them. You don't, unless you're getting your PhD in biochemistry, you don't need to go to UCLA with the big lab and everything.
But that's a state school. I mean,
that's BA in secondary education. You can go to, Northern, Southern, Western, Eastern, Podunk State University, and you're going to do fine, and you may have a great time in the process.
And it's like, like Mr. Midwife was talking, we were talking about earlier, it's like all that general education is just like, here, they want you to tick off these classes that you know what you have this base foundation, bad or good or whatever. You just do it, you grind through it to get to like your core of what you're majoring in and get those core classes at the highest quality place you can afford that you can get into. And really, hit up those scholarships, do whatever you can, play whether it's sports.
Everyone always says that. Aren't there scholarships that go unclaimed every year? It's like, you know what?
For nurses, it's really tough. I mean, you can't because in a 2-year program in ADN, you're really not going to get any scholarships. You go to a BSN, you're still not. I mean, I don't know where the money is. I mean, I know that the federal government put a lot of money into the NP programs and gave a lot of schools money to expand. I actually looked into that the last couple of years. But where's the proof in the pudding? Are they really showing that they've expanded by 90 slots or 100 slots? They're giving money to expand, but they're still making the money on the tuition.
And if you look, even if you write a nice essay for the Daughters of the Revolution and they give you $500, great, it costs $10,000. So that $500 pays for my pencils, basically,
I would say too, the brick and mortar, like what Jay Michael's saying, the purpose of college is just to say you can finish something a lot of times. And it is networking to go to brick and mortar. I am a big fan of brick and mortar versus online because you can network. I mean, I'm friends with people that I went to college with, 35 years ago. Yeah. And I think that you cannot, the importance of networking. And then when you get up, and I just keep hearing over and over again, people that go to online schools, and I had this experience too. It's very hard to develop relationships with professors, to get those letters of recommendation, to, that stuff is just a lot harder.
It's harder, but not impossible, because I have a study.
No, I mean, nothing's impossible. I'm just saying you're not, if you're going to WGU and you don't even have professors, you just have competencies, or you go to competency-based programs. There are a lot of online schools that are just like, here, do the rubric, turn it in. You don't even have a cohort.
WGU is amazing, but you're not in a class of people. You're in a class of one, basically.
Yeah,
There's great support from faculty, but it's a whole different model. Yeah. I'm going to a distance learning program, and I have a school wife. Basically, she and I have been study buddies since the beginning. I'm surprised she hasn't called me yet today. We're in contact all the time. I know her husband, and anyway.
Yeah, it's like getting that resource is really important.
And there's a few other people we put in study groups, but it's kind of they've kind of fallen away, and it's been down to just the two of us. And so helpful to have someone to bounce ideas off of. And then we have a Facebook group, and we all keep what did you think about the last test? And did anybody ask about that question? Or does anybody know what the process is for doing this? Or, are we supposed to do this on that? Very, very helpful to have that contact. But it's different than being in brick and mortar and being in the same physical space.
Yeah.
So if you do it, the point is, if you decide to go that route and do a distance education program, make an effort to set up a Facebook group for your class and to find your study buddy or study buddies.
Yeah, Facebook groups are good. That's a good idea, Scott. Yeah, I think, and just, it's all relationships. Stay in relationship with people and in contact with people. It's just, you never know. I mean, I've gotten calls from people I knew years ago, students I taught as CNAs that are nurses now, and they, want a letter. And I'm like, who are you? Wait. And
I thought you never forgot a face.
Well, I forget names though. I never forget
Oh,
a face, but I forget names. I have people all the
Selective
time.
Alzheimer's.
You know
Yeah, yeah.
what, Adrian, now that you say that, sometimes students will message me. So I put all of my students, this is a little inside trick, but I put all of my students that I taught, I'll be like, first and last name AHU because I taught at different schools. So, oops, I just
Right.
said the school I used to teach at. But anyways, school, semester they were in, and sometimes I won't remember them, like you said, by name. So I'll go
Right.
on Facebook, like because I have their first and last name, and I'm like, oh, okay. And one time I couldn't find a girl. I was like, can you send me a picture of you? Because I need to see you. Like, I don't remember
Right.
what you look like.
Or
That's
when
amazing.
people like recognize me maybe off TikTok or something, and then it's like, I'm like, oh wait, do I know you, or do you just know me? Right?
Yeah.
Like I've had that happen, and
I
it's like
haven't
so
been
awkward.
recognized. Where did
It's
you get
I
recognized?
almost was when I called
awkward.
911 the day I had the horrible back pain. I called 911 and I was feeling a little better in the ambulance that's outside when they gave me a little medicine for pain. I was talking to the paramedic and I said something about shots. And that's the big video on my YouTube channel is how to give yourself a painless self-injection and all this stuff and everything. He's like, oh, he's like, what's your YouTube channel? I'm like, Nurse Scott. He's like, I think I've seen you. I'm like, how about that small world? I don't know if he was just being nice or not, but just the
Oh,
fact
now that you say that, I did have one student that was just coming in that I was teaching that day, a virtual class, and she was later messaged me privately, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, I just saw your dosage calc video before class, and now I see that you're teaching us." So that was
Yeah,
like
your
kind
stuff
of cool.
comes up all the time. I mean, on the algorithm. The algorithm likes, I mean,
But you know what? I don't. Well, it's probably because we're friends, first of all. But I don't have time to make educational content anymore. Like it was easy when I
yeah.
was teaching, but I don't
but
have
those videos
time.
that are out there are still out there. So
Mhm.
Yeah.
they're still doing their job. You don't have to put new ones out. The
Yeah,
ones
but
those are
the
still there.
algorithm now is confused when I put out new videos because they're not educational. So it's just like, ugh.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, it's I think it's we just repurpose those older videos and then put them on TikTok.
Good
Yeah, I
idea.
did that because my one about giving yourself a shot. I'm like, I need to do a follow up because I've been answering all the comments and they're always the same questions. I'm like, I've got to do a
Yes,
FAQ.
that's a good idea. Go to
I
the
did an FAQ video as well, and then link the two together. So if you see one, you see the other.
And
So we'll
see
see.
now, Mr. Midwife, do you have another reason to make more content, even though you're super busy now, you're in school, but the journey of returning to school.
I might later.
I know.
I need to get through this first portion first.
I know. You're doing awesome. You're doing awesome. Hey guys, I gotta run.
Yeah.
It's been awesome.
I think I
glad
sent like an hour ago that I wanted to wrap up.
Yeah.
I was like 5 more minutes, guys, and we talked for like another hour.
That must have been when I got cut off.
Noralia, we're just about to sign out.
Hey, Nora, good to see you.
Nora, where you been?
Dang it. She just pulled in about to start my test outs for clinical. Right on. Happy Friday, everybody. Yeah, I got to get back to the